Okay, it's 3 o'clock, so we'll call this meeting to order. The first thing we need to do is approve the agenda. Oh, where's Brandy?
Randy
Brandy.
She was on the phone.
Stepped out of it.
just walked
She
out.
stepped out for a minute.
What?
She just stepped out for a minute.
Well, we'll just go ahead and start. All right, so the first thing we do is the adoption of the agenda.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move that we table item D of consent agenda items till the next meeting.
Item D. That's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, raise your right hand. All right, item D is removed to the next session, next meeting. Brandy, we've just voted on the agenda and on the consent agenda. We're moving item D to the next meeting, okay? Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Any discussion? Raise your hand. All right, so the agenda is approved. And so with that, I guess we'll just move right into the budget. Before we start the budget, I do want to say one thing, is last night there was I'm going to call it a protest, for lack of a better term. My church would be termed a lot of things downtown. I would just want to commend the people there that did it. I really think it was a pretty well-behaved, organized protest. It doesn't take but just a minute for these things to go left or right real quick. And I know Councilmember Matthews was there, and Councilmember Williams was there, and they may have some comments they want to make too. And but I just want to thank everybody. I want to thank our law enforcement. I think they did. I think they did a really good job with it. As I said, I think the participants did a good job, and I know there's supposed to be another one tonight. So everybody cross their fingers that the one tonight is just as peaceful as the one last night was. And with that, y'all got any comments? All right, Catherine?
I got it, sir.
Okay, go ahead.
No, thank you, Mayor and council members. In the midst of the coronavirus and protests surrounding George Floyd's death, we are here to discuss the next year's city budget, which will guide and enable our government services. Before discussing the budget, I'd like to say that I greatly appreciate and admire the local law enforcement officers and community leaders that kept last night's downtown protest peaceful for the most part. If Chief West were here right now and not out preparing for the next protest scheduled at 5 p.m. today, he would tell you his officers keeping the peace were in silent protest with those who were vocal about the Minneapolis police officers' treatment of a person in their custody. To ensure tonight's protest remain peaceful, our GPD officers, Wayne County Sheriff deputies, and state troopers will again be prepared to support the peaceful protest and act to prevent violence. To prevent the potential for violence that has occurred in other cities, the mayor declared a state of emergency earlier today and instituted a curfew from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. until further notice, with the exception of people reporting to work. Ultimately, the safety and property of all concerned lies in the hands of our people, and I pray they will reject violence and work with our law enforcement officers to uphold law and order. So on to the budget. Due to COVID-19, this year's budget revenue and expenditure projections are conservative. We plan for zero growth at our current tax rates and the 25% increase in utility water and sewer rates to pay for operations and infrastructure that provide our high-quality water. You will note in comparison to last year, the revenue and expenditures of our general fund are almost $1 million less. The utility fund is $1.7 million more, and the stormwater fund is $409,000 more, for an overall increase of $1.2 million, or 1.9%. Significant investments focused on council goals and citizen expectations include safe and secure community. Our Goldsboro Fire Department personnel are fully funded, and our Goldsboro Police Department is funded at current staffing levels. Operations are funded less than last year, but more or the same as the previous year. And capital improvements pay for the public safety complex expansion and new Fire Station 4. In our strong and diverse economy, Seymour Johnson Air Force Base has a local economic impact of $770 million, and our budget supports that relationship for the annual air show, or the biannual air show, and other activities. The city $9 million investment downtown has generated a 6-to-1 return on federal, state, and private investment, which will include $15 million over the next 2 years to create 65 apartments and 15,000 square feet of commercial space. Additionally, investments in the Maxwell Center and Bryan Multi-Sports Complex will add to our economy and generate tax revenue when COVID-19 permits. Exceptional quality of life. Access to Goldsboro-owned and operated parks and rec facilities is excellent according to the UNC School of Government Benchmark Project. And our budget keeps them open, but does not fund a new Harmon Park Center this year. Funding for some summer activities has been cut for part-time help due to funding restrictions expected with COVID-19. The Paramount Theater remains open, but there may be some cost savings there as well in the future. Racial and cultural harmony, the 5-year consolidated plan and associated annual action plans coordinated with citizens and approved by council will determine how a projected $4.7 million is spent over the next 5 years. These documents will be discussed over the next month and submitted to HUD in July, and the recommended budget can be amended accordingly. Due to general fund constraints, nonprofit organization funding is reduced by 10% in the manager's recommended budget. Model of excellence in government. The strategic plan for the city that was developed and presented to council will help us evaluate and implement public services to meet established vision, mission, values, and goals in the future. And the recent utility rate study is essential to determine the best fiscally responsible way to build our utility customers, while setting aside funds for additional employees, future plant enhancements, and the eventual construction of new facilities. I will now turn the presentation over to our Finance Director, Ms. Catherine Gwynn, who has worked diligently on it.
Thank you, Mr.
Catherine.
Manager. I appreciate that. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I welcome you here to this budget hearing, or not budget hearing, budget meeting. And it's probably the most important financial task that you do as a council representing the citizens. So I welcome you here and welcome your questions. I want to thank the department heads, the admin staff, and finance for their hard work. I've ballparked it, and I think we probably have better than 1,000 man-hours that goes into producing this big book and this presentation. So it represents a significant investment of time for the staff, but it is a document that I know that I use every single day. It is that important. So we appreciate everybody's hard work and effort. They do not take this task lightly. They put a lot of heart into it, and it's a lot of painful decision for all of us when we have to balance the budget. So we thank everybody for their participation and their input in this, and to tell you how important this job is, and we appreciate all the effort that you put in and the hard decisions that you have to make, because we just present it. You ultimately are the bosses, so you tell us what to do, and I know it is a very, very difficult task that you have before you. So I will say this is probably the most difficult budget I've had. It's 14 budgets this year for me, and this in 13 years, and this has been the hardest one that I've had to balance because of the uncertainties that we've had to deal with. I am sorry that we could not get the information to you sooner. I apologize. We just have had a lot of challenges, too numerous to name, but we've had a lot of challenges that we've been having to deal with, but we will work and strive that next year will be earlier and it will be better, and so we're going to look forward and not behind us. I want to welcome our new council members. Please reach out to us, any of us, if you have any questions or concerns. This is a lot of information. I mean, you know, I've lived this every single day for, 13 years, so it's pretty easy to me. At this time, it's still a lot of information. So if you aren't sure, ask, because somebody else may also have that same question. We have also changed how we've put the book together. I have tried to provide you with more detailed information than really probably you've had in the past. I think in the past you were probably driven primarily by line items. We have tried to give you justification sheets so that it provides you the information in more detail. And I welcome your suggestions. If there is a chart or a table or a narrative or maybe a different way to present it, then I welcome the suggestions and we can see what we can do. It depends on how much time it takes. But everybody perceives and understands information differently. And every board I've worked for, I've always tweaked whenever I've had new board members because they just take it in a little bit differently. So we're definitely willing to change and help adapt. So please, we welcome your suggestions. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And we're going to hit the first slide, which is an overview. It worked when we tried it. I'm thinking pointing at the right thing. I don't know. IT? I don't know if it goes to sleep or not.
There you go. I got it.
Okay, there we go. Okay. So the fiscal year 21 manager's recommended budget is $64.39 million. That is a $1.2 million decrease or a 1.9% decrease from the prior fiscal year adopted. And just to note that the general fund and utility fund, the green and blue pieces of that pie, make up 96% of that $64.39 million. So we will spend most of our time talking about the general fund and the utility fund. All right, so Laura, are you going to flip slides for me? Okay, hit the next slide, please. The next slide basically presents that same information, but broken down to you to tell you how your money, your tax dollars are spent. So obviously, salary and benefits are the biggest portion, taking up $31 million. That's about 49% of that $64 million budget. Operational costs account for about 26%. Debt service, 14%. Vehicle and capital outlay, $2.8 million. Transfers and shared services, about $4 million, which is about 7% of the budget. The only thing that is omitted from this table is, and it was due to space constraints, is the general fund, capital reserve, and community development fund, which is $1,800, so they were not significant. But that's what makes up that $64 million budget that we're going to be talking about tonight, primarily driven a lot by salary and benefits. So you'll understand that when we talk about trying to balance the budget with revenues, when you're trying to cut operations, you can only cut so much before you have to start digging into personnel, which we did not do and tried we didn't want to do that because we don't want to see anybody lose their job. So Laura, if you'll flip to the next slide. So on the previous slide, it shows $16.6 million. It's in the bottom right corner there. That's the total operational cost. So these would be things like fuel, electricity, telephone, rent, advertising, travel, training, repairs, maintenance, things of that nature. And so some of those costs in operational are fixed because we have contracts. You might have a copier contract. You might have a contract for your heating and cooling. So there are a lot of different contracts. So it's not all just supplies. So when we cut and you talk about $64 million, if you're $2 million short and you've only got $16 million operational to work with, you're not going to do a lot of cutting without really cutting very deep. And I will tell you, we cut deep in this past week and a half as we were trying to balance this budget. So this particular slide just kind of gives you a highlight. The funds run across the top and the expenditures run to the very left. And they kind of tell you some of the larger expenditures, if you're curious. Again, all of this detail is in your book, but this is really collapsing and summarizing those particular expenditure types for you in the operational. So, Laura, if you can move on. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about fund balance, but in terms, I don't want us to get too stuck on talking about fund balance because fund balance is a historical number. Fund balance exists as of one day in the year, June 30th. As you know, I'm still working on the 19 audit, and I've had to put that on hold so I could get budget done. And so, I have to look at 20 and I've got to look at 21. So I've been spending a lot of time in the present and in the future, not in the past. Fund balance is a past tense number. So what I really want y'all to understand is that I'm showing you the beginning fund balances as estimated. I put a question mark there with the general fund because I really don't know what that number is yet. There are just so many uncertainties. I can tell you that we're going to have some timing differences for sure in revenue. So the FEMA reimbursement, that's going to be about $600,000 that I planned for in fiscal '20 that's not going to materialize. I still have, I believe it's 2 or 3 pending FEMA projects that Atlanta and Washington have not approved yet. And we're talking about this happened in 2018. So what we thought would be done is not going to be done. It will come though, and we will get that money back, so it will be a timing difference in the revenue. So you have a budget item for $600,000 showing up there. It's not gonna come in hopefully it'll come in '21, but I'm sure all of you watch the news like I do, and you know it has been disaster after disaster after disaster for the past several years. So another thing that's affecting us is that I had included in '20 revenue for borrowing. In the general fund specifically, there was about 1.2 million. And I'll be honest, I just have been so underwater, just haven't had time to do the borrowing. That is a timing difference, but it was a planned revenue in 2020 that is not going to materialize. It will materialize in '21, and what I planned on doing, if the board approves the capital outlay or a portion of it, I'm going to combine fiscal '20, fiscal '21 together, which is probably going to save me about $20,000 in debt cost. So I'm going to package it together. We'll have one debt payment that will start in fiscal '22. So again, that's another timing difference. There were PO rollovers. I know we've talked about this quite a bit, but we've had PO rollovers in about $1.5 million from fiscal '19 rolling into '20. That takes your fund balance. So if we did nothing, and every dollar came in and every dollar got spent, you will drop your fund balance by $1.5 million for this past year, because those PO rollovers are commitments that you agreed to pay, that the board agreed to pay, and that staff presented.
Can
So,
we review that, Kathy?
sir?
Can we review that?
The PO rollovers? I would be glad, I sent those earlier back in February, but what I would say is I wouldn't dwell on it because we have so much to go over, because that's a done deal. When that PO is issued, it is a contract by law. The only time it dies is at June 30, appropriations lapsed. But let me say, I have said, and I know the manager backs me up on this, that PO rollovers at the end of this June will be few and far between, because we are not going to commit fund balance to that unless it is absolutely necessary. For instance, you've got your HV Brown Park, that construction in progress. You cannot say, I'm not going to pay you. So if we still owe him $10,000, we've got to commit to roll that PO over. And there are a couple things. Chief Dixon had something that he has to get done, and it was due to COVID-19. So that one will get rolled over, but you're not going to have 1.5 million in PO rollovers. I can promise you that.
Well, if we had $500,000, that would be helpful. And I don't even know if we do. I'm just asking the question.
I won't know.
It seems like we should look at the list and be sure everything's still necessary.
You don't have to worry about that, because we will clean that list up. And again, they are all on notice. I've already told them, and they understand why, because we have to protect our fund balance. And so that is one of those things. We will not be bringing you a big list of PO rollovers. But again, there's nothing that we can do to stop that. The only thing that stops that is June 30th. And at June 30th, the appropriations die. So there technically are no PO rollovers unless we bring them back to council and the council approves them. So you will see that most likely the first week of August is when I do PO
So
rollovers.
just help me with this. Let's just say they die June 30th, like you say. What if we don't reapprove them? What happens?
I'm
What if
sorry.
we don't reapprove them?
They die.
Yep.
They
So-
die. That's it.
Okay.
You're
so I'm
done.
asking-
Just like school system. School system does not roll POs. June 30, if you don't have your money, you're not going to get it, because that appropriation lapses. Okay? So we're going to kind of take a similar approach to that, because we got to preserve fund balance. So another thing that we have to look at is the June 30 estimates and the final budget amendment for fiscal 1920. You will have that coming up at the June 15th meeting. That's going to be the very next thing that I'm going to have to.
Somebody's hot mic out there, if you could make sure you are not speaking on it. Go ahead.
Okay, so I have a final budget amendment that I will need to bring forth to you. And just to say that I have a couple of issues, as I mentioned on March the 16th, when I came to talk to you about help, specifically related to debt that I am aware of, that have come up since, really it's been in the last 2 or 3 months. We've made a discovery, and it will impact fund balance to the tune of probably about $1.5 million. There's not a thing in the world I can do about it. Those were things that I inherited that were just not done correctly, and they've got to be corrected because debt has to be appropriated. As far as the spending in the departments, I mean, they have been limited. I mean, they are limited to their budget. So I feel like our June 30 estimates are overboard, I'll be honest. They just look like they're overboard. But this has been a learning curve for the departments in the sense that, you know, prior to this year that we're budgeting right now, they had never budgeted their own salaries before, which I think is a critical mistake because the largest cost that they manage are people. So they should understand what those dollars are. So they've had a learning curve this year. I think they've done very well with it, with the new format. So this is a participation process because that's part of what we as department heads get paid for is to manage our own budget. So we're trying to teach and learn and spread this knowledge around. Excuse me. So the other issue that I want to talk about a little bit was revenue. So with the sales tax and utility franchise tax, they are our 2 largest state shared revenues. So the sales tax obviously comes from sales that happen in and about the city of Goldsboro. And so when I was trying to project what is June 30 of 2020 going to look like, what's going to materialize, and what's going to happen for fiscal year 21, I tell you, my crystal ball has never been cloudier. I mean, it was really difficult because what happened as I started to budget the revenues, which I typically do at the end of March when the North Carolina League of Municipality puts out their revenue projections document, well, COVID hit March 13th. I mean, that's kind of when we started seeing the schools close down. And so, and you know, there was a run on the stores, there was shortages, so we just really weren't sure how it was going to impact us. Well, then the memo from the league was much later than usual. It actually came towards the end of April. And of course, it was a dire prediction, and they had levels of severe and moderate and extreme that they gave us. So when I'm looking at June 30th, I really don't know. I mean, who would have thought that we would have been shut down for like 10 or 12 weeks? I mean, we just never thought that. So I really don't know in terms of how is that going to affect the fourth quarter sales tax. So you think about what you buy in the month of April, we won't see it until May, June, July, okay, because of the timing of when it's remitted. So I'm trying to guess what's the fourth quarter going to be. So I did take kind of a moderate decrease approach to it. And I'm predicting about a little over, I think it was 1.1 million roughly, in decreases in kind of like a moderate severe case scenario. And the thing about it is that Goldsboro was on track to have increased sales tax for fiscal 20. We were going to make what we had thought, what I predicted last year, we were going to make that and maybe a little bit more. I'm just not sure. You know, Randy and I have had a lot of discussions about this. I mean, he's been in government a long time, done a lot of budgets, and he feels that we're probably a little more recession-proof because of the base and having come from another military town like that. I mean, there's some truth to it. But the problem is, the question mark that I have up on the slide is, I don't know. I just don't know. I won't know until July, August, September, the last distribution will come in. And so I won't know towards middle to late September, how did we do through June 30 of 20? So the best answer, as I told you, the last meeting that we talked at, you know, I said, what did we do? We froze spending in March, you know, when we knew things were starting to decline, and we found out, so we reacted as early as we could. We are delaying positions, hiring as long as we can. You will see that we have frozen some positions, mainly in police to help balance the budget. So we're trying to take measures, and if there's capital that is approved, that capital will not be bought before January. I mean, because we've got to get at least 6 months under our belt to kind of know how is this COVID going to play out. And the other thing is it going to come back? I mean, if we get into flu season, September, October, November, is it going to come back with a vengeance? Are we going to be closed? So at that point, we would have to look at other measures. But the main thing I just want you to understand is that I just don't know when we look at the June 30 sales tax what the number is going to be. And I don't want to put a number up there to say that your fund balance is going to decrease a certain amount of money when I'm just guessing at this point. So what you should understand is that we are focused on controlling our spending, only spending what is necessary, holding positions as long as we can to help save money, okay? So as far as the appropriated fund balance for this year, again, we did not take an approach of we've got to use fund balance to balance the budget because we're trying to preserve fund balance. The only thing that was requested that the manager okayed was a mower from the cemetery reserves of about $12,000, and that's a fund balance appropriation. It's actually in what's called reserved fund balance cemetery fund. And then in the occupancy tax fund, there's $115,000. And to help us balance the budget, we moved a payment for the Bryan Multi-Sports Complex lighting from the general fund into the occupancy tax fund. And we'll talk about that fund balance level because they do have sufficient fund balance. Move that, and then an air show donation. And the one thing that's not showing here is that the manager and the director of the Travel and Tourism talked about another $40,000 to help with some advertising to help bring the tourism, to bring the travelers back to Goldsboro. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. So I don't want to dwell too much on the past, but that's kind of where we are. Preserve fund balance. That's what I want y'all to remember. That's what we're trying to do, okay? All right, Laura.
I know you said there was going to be a hiring freeze, but I noticed there's 2 lawn care employees that we're still going to hire those 2 people.
Yes, sir, with the 2 employees?
Yeah.
Yes, sir, yes, sir. So we're trying anything, if it's critical or essential, but if it is a position that can be held, we will hold that position. Yes, sir. Okay. So we're going to talk about revenues, we're going to talk about debt, we're going to talk about the different requests by fund and capital outlay. And so, Laura, if you'll skip to the pie chart, general fund revenue, that one right there. So this is another snapshot of the revenue. And if you recall, when we talked a couple of weeks ago, I said that 76% of the general fund revenue comes from your property taxes, so that's the citizens. And then the other portion comes from state shared revenues, the lion's share of that being your sales tax, is the biggie. Utility franchise tax comes in a really small second, but it's mainly sales tax. So we had revenues of $43 million in 19. We are recommending $42 million, so we've decreased almost $1 million. And that's a lot of money. I mean, it takes about $250,000 on the penny for your tax dollars. So you're talking about 4 pennies. I mean, I'm telling you, that's a lot. I mean, you think about when you have a person, let's say that it's a maintenance worker, sanitation worker, and with their salaries and benefits, maybe they make $35,000. I mean, how many bodies is that? So this was painful. So we'll go through, Laura, if you'll flip to the next line, we'll talk a little bit about the revenues. So taxes are pretty much flat. We had a small bump up in value, and I'm talking about a real small bump up in value. So it's going to net us about $228,000, we believe. And again, is COVID going to affect it? It possibly could. I mean, we collected all our taxes for this past fiscal year, but we don't know how people's economic and financial situation is going to be, so it could affect our collections some. The next biggie that we want to talk about as far as the revenue from other agencies is what I wanted to talk about, state collected revenues, where you're seeing the minus $1,024,398. So the big issue there that we're dealing with the sales tax is there's no increase, decrease. I kept it flat. So this is flat from the prior year. So we know already June 30th, I said we're going to be about $1 million down, and that's kind of where I've kept it at. So that's really kind of the big issue when we look at, there are other state revenues that are going to show decreases in that. One of the biggies is going to be the FEMA reimbursement. That's not showing in there as well. We have the mind of saying we're going to keep the sales tax flat in the coming year, because if I was to go towards a kind of a conservative approach on the revenue, we could be looking at minus $1.5 million. So, then it's like, well, how do you balance a budget adding another $1.5 million? I mean, it is really tough. As you saw, $16 million in operating expenses. I mean, you start cutting out $1.5 million out of that, you're going to cut services. And then what do you do next? Your biggest expense is your people. And I know that this board doesn't want to cut people. I mean, you want to provide the service. So what we had to do is, our philosophy was to stay at a moderate, say that there would be no sales tax growth, although every year Goldsboro has had sales tax growth. This is a good economy, a lot of spending going on. So almost in the sense of taking no growth is almost like losing, because, inflation. So what we'll do is we will monitor the revenues as they come in month by month. And if we see that there is a drastic change because of the COVID, then we will come back and we'll have to make some hard decisions about what we think needs to be cut at that point, because you cut revenue, you've either got to substitute it with another revenue, or you got to cut an expense. And so we will talk more about this. This is going to be something we typically don't have to do, but I think in light of the situation we're in, we're going to pay much more close attention to this each month as the new fiscal year begins. Do you have a question, Mr. Mayor?
I do. Help me with this now. You got the $16 million this year, and what you're saying is you're only budgeting $15 million for next year. But when I go down, I don't see $1 million worth of deficit anywhere. So I'm trying to figure out how are you getting that difference?
A lot of this, we were trying to get in the book that's got the detailed revenues. You'll see the changes that are in there. I used the slides, and I'll be honest, I was doing this yesterday, trying to get this done. So it doesn't have all the categories that I think would be relevant.
But somewhere there, that's there.
Oh, yes, yes, sir. Yes, sir, ad nauseum. There is detail in there in the revenues. And you can actually, in the new format that I've got, you'll see a percent change as well. So you can see in red the minus percentages or the minus dollars. So any of that you want to see, it's just not, I just didn't have the time to update this as much, because I was 61 pages. It was a lot of stuff to try to do in one day, so. Okay, so to talk about a little bit with charges for services, one of the things that you may have heard Rick Fletcher talk about a little bit is recycling fees. It went from nothing, where we actually were getting paid for our recycling, and then things happened with China, and China didn't want it anymore, to, it's costing $125,000 a year. So we tried to figure out how can we help, because his budget, he is one of those that does have some deficit going on, because he only had, I think, $60,000 in recycling. He's going to have like $125,000 this year. So what we discussed was a $1 recycling surcharge that we would propose, which would bring in enough money to cover those astronomical landfill and recycling costs. And that is totally, up to the board. It helps us balance the budget by providing for something that we did not have before, and I know that the board is environmentally conscious and they want to continue the recycling program, I think, but, you're welcome to speak up, speak out about that as well. The other new thing that we have that I inserted in there were some planning fees. They had not had any fee changes since 2005, and they have astronomical advertising fees for legal advertisements. So we don't really have a ballpark yet. That was something that Jennifer and I have talked about, and we've been working on it the last couple of days. I just didn't have enough to be able to put it in the budget. I should be able to get a number. I don't think it's going to be a large number, but I just wanted to put that placeholder in there, because that will be included in the ordinance unless the board has some objection to changing the planning fees. And they're small changes. I don't think it's It's
On the
astronomical.
recycling, you're saying $1 a month
$1 per month, yes, sir.
per household?
Per house, yes, sir.
I got a question, and I
Sure.
know you don't know the answer, but you can find it out probably. We'll be paying $168,000 a year for recycling. In other words, to haul the stuff to the recycler and we pay him then. If we just carried it to the landfill, how would the tipping fees be compared to it?
And I'm not sure if Rick, is Rick Fletcher on the WebEx? Would Rick like to say something?
We have our department heads are on a WebEx, should be able to answer questions. You out there, Rick? Let's check with
But Gene,
IT,
we
but
looked at that before, and it's cheaper.
it's much cheaper to take it, just take it to the dump, but then you're not really complying with state.
Last time we looked at it, it was definitely cheaper to take it to the dump.
And I think that was his issue, is that some things are really illegal to put in the landfill, and so that was why, you know, the continuation of the recycling was the issue.
And then there is a certain element of the citizens that really like recycling, so you'll have a little bit of a backlash there too, probably. if you were to
So
change.
Catherine,
Sir, yes, sir.
I understand you proposing, for lack of a better term, a $1 recycling fee per household. That's on top of the proposed 25% utility rate
That's correct.
increase.
Yes, sir, that is correct. And we've got a slide in there that will talk about how that 25% rate increase affects the average household as well. Yes, sir, we do. Yes, we are. Okay. And on, I know, I don't know if my clicker will work, I'll try. There we go, too far. Okay, and then the rest of the revenues are really small in comparison. Again, fund balance appropriation this year, $12,964 for that mower for the cemetery fund. In the previous year, basically, we had that Tiger match that was part of the $1.775 million that the city committed to the Tiger project, and that $600,000 was one of those installments, so that's why we appropriated so much fund balance last year, and there was one mower bought as well. Okay, and so again, the budget's gone down almost $1 million from the prior fiscal year. Okay. So just a quick on, again, about general fund balance. Right now, what I have estimated is approximately 14% for FY19 when we get through this final audit. The LGC recommends 8% as a minimum. The council has established a 15% minimum floor for fund balance. So that's why we need to preserve and we need to try to add back to the fund balance. Again, we're not going to recommend a certain amount at this point for FY20 because of the uncertainties with the COVID. We will continue the spending freezes and delays in hiring, and we will continue that until probably December, January, until we get a better idea, and we will let you know as we go how things are progressing with those collections. Okay. So usually there's a slide in here about self-sufficiency, and I split this up this year to do the general fund and then one for the utility fund. In the categories you have been given before were for garbage collection, the golf course, Paramount, and the Goldsboro Event Center. On refuse, the overage for the garbage is basically $72,000, but that does have the $168,000 for the recycling surcharge built in that. So if the board does not approve that, then obviously you got to take out $168,000 from that. The golf course, we're showing a $66,000 deficit, the Paramount a $372,000 deficit, and the Event Center a $67,000 deficit in those particular activities. Okay. So in the utility fund, the big issue that we're going to talk about here is the 25% rate increase for water and sewer charges. That's going to be reflected on the far right column with the 1.3 and the 1.6 million. We have a little bit of a decrease in the FEMA reimbursement, but again, at some point, that's a time and difference. That money will come back. So what we adopted in FY '20 was a $17.2 million budget. In FY '21, we're proposing an $18.9 million budget. It's an increase of $1.7 million. So our utility rate study consultant, Stantec, helped me with the next couple of slides to help prepare for this meeting. And what we would be looking at would be this rate structure that you see here per 1,000 gallons as far as the fee increases. And these don't mean quite as much. The next slide will help a lot more. Explains it a little bit better. So if we compared for the average consumption of 5,000 gallons, as they told you when they discussed this in their presentation, they polled various communities around, and Jacksonville, city of Jacksonville, $102.49. And if you scroll down and look where it says Goldsboro FY '20, that's currently, for that same bill, would be $57.59 currently, and then up would be $72.03 with a 25% rate increase. So it still puts us kind of somewhere in the middle as they discussed with y'all, and again, with this recycling surcharge, that would be plus $1 more per month. And we still are very competitive with our rates, and I think that the one thing that you probably can take away from this is that there is a lot to do in the water and sewer. I don't know when the last time was you saw the CIP, but there's a lot of work, and I think we're going to talk about this on the next slide when we talk about self-sufficiency. And, you know, I questioned the, you know, we had self-sufficiency numbers, and I didn't have time to go back and dig into the 1920 and the 1819 because it's showing that we provided more than what, you know, we were spending. And again, I have to look at the calculations because I followed the model that was given to me before, but the consultant said, you know, Catherine, I just can't see that y'all have been self-sufficient. And I probably agree with him when you look at the fund balance, I would have probably agree with him on that. And the thing that I think he mentioned that I don't know if y'all took that away with you, if we don't do something in the next year, fund balance in the utility fund will be depleted. It's around $4 million or so now, and if we go another year with no rate increase, we're not going to be able to cover operating and debt service. So forget about, you know, upgrades to a water plant or upgrades to a sewer plant or fixing corroded galvanized pipes in the ground. It's going to be very difficult just to even maintain our operations. And so, you know, what he's saying is that they did a cost of service. So they looked at how much does it cost to maintain those lines. And so with the 25% rate increase, it's an offset of about $264,000 between water to sewer, but it kind of gets us even. And so, you know, of course, I understand how difficult the economic times are. A lot of people are struggling just to pay bills and to put food on the table and put gas in the car and get to work every day. But I think that looking at their data that they have put together that, you know, comes from our financial data, that we do have some issues in the utility fund that do need to be addressed. I mean, you've got about 145 projects. I mean, that list of CIP just boggles my mind, that when you total it up, it's probably $250 million in the next 10 years. And you saw the increase, right? You saw 1.7 million increase, and you got 250 million. And if you borrow the money, you know, there's interest on top of that. Is how do you pay for that? And so I think the issue is it's not just that this rate increase pays for the capital. So I don't want you to get that in your mind, but you got to realize you got to pay your bills. You got to pay your debt service. You got to pay your operational costs. And we have a lot of stuff that's old and broken, hence the 145 capital projects. There are major renovations that need to go on with water services and sewer services and pipes in the ground. that need to get done. And if you stay the track that you're on, I do think that you are going to have some financial issues that you're just not going to be able to address, that somebody else down the road is going to have to address. And one thing that unfortunately we've had to cut out of the budget to get things to balance, to get the materials and the manpower that they need, we've had to cut the utility master plan update. The last one was done in 2008. I guess Mike's ballpark figure for the engineering services to do that, it's around $515,000. But I would say that it is urgent that if we cut through some of these things and we've got some extra savings, that we try to fund that master plan so that you know, are the 145 projects that need to get done, are they valid? Can they not be done? Is there some other version you could do? And the number that they have is an old number. It is not a cost inflated number. So the 250 or 240, 250 million, I mean, it may be 275 or 280 because it's not been done since 2008. So that is an important decision, I think, for this council to look at, is to say, you know, do we trust our staff and say that the 145 projects are good, or do we go and get an engineering firm to come and look and say, do you need $250 million worth of work? Are those valid things? Because that's, you think $500,000 is a lot of money, but if you're going to spend $250 million, it's probably worth the investment. So I think that from a self-sufficiency standpoint, that I know that the 25% is painful, but I do think it's necessary. And I think in my conversations, and I think in Mike Wagner's conversations with Stantec, that we do feel like it is necessary. Now, if the board says, you know, Catherine, no way, we're just not going to do that, then, I mean, we have to cut about $1.8 million out of the budget. I mean, that's really the long and short of it. So we lose capital, we lose some new, I think, some critical positions that are needed, and then you start digging deeper and start cutting other expenditures. And if you know, Mike is available in Randy's office as well if you want to know a little bit more about some of the critical needs that he's got that, you know, can cause the city a lot of heartache and a lot of violation fees. If you're interested or would like to spend some time on that, we can, but I'll leave that up to you. I'll stop for some questions if y'all have any. I know it's a lot.
If I could comment on the garbage and the recycling fees. Garbage is about $32 per ton. Recycling is $100 to $110, so 3 times more expensive.
Well, and then I think the other thing with recycling, you gotta remember, is you're taking it to Fayetteville or somewhere. I mean, it's not local at all, so it's even gonna be more expensive for the transfer fee. But as I said, now, you think water rates are bad, they're gonna be just as bad if you start trying to take out recycling, I think. There's a lot, you know, some people just, that's the way of life. But anyway.
I agree.
Catherine, can you explain where, I'm looking where we had grants in fiscal year 18-19, and we don't have any grants showing as of yet for the Golden Leaf Grant, the Main Street Solution Grant reimbursement, and the Part F grant reimbursement, and the state grants NCDOT. Is there a reason why we don't have anything?
Yes, sir. That's a really good question. Okay, so part of it is that there are quite a few of these now, I've moved them into capital project funds because a lot of those, they take more than a year. And because we have to deal with, you know, you don't start building an $8.9 million sewer rehab and then say, hey, your POs are cut off at the end of the year. So state law allows us to create capital project funds that have a life of the project. It's not, so what we're talking about today are just annual operating budgets, budgets that go from July 1 to June 30. So in order to help with that, we pull those out into a special ordinance called a capital project fund ordinance. And so we bring those back as needed, but the funding for those is already set. So you know that if I bring you one for the Phase 4 SRF, that the funding is $8.9 million in SRF funding, and we're going to spend $8.9 million in expenditures. So the same thing works with the Golden Leaf Grant. I've pulled that out into a capital project fund, so it has a life of its own. Because what tends to happen with these things, when you try to put long-lived projects in operating funds, people don't understand, well, why did fire's budget all of a sudden go from a $5 million to $15 million? Well, it was because there was maybe a fire station or something like that involved in it. So the better technique is when it's a long-life project is do it with a capital project fund. Now, we have had some of the NCDOT, like the signal reimbursement went down because we've not had a traffic engineer. So it didn't go away, it just went down significantly. But other things that, unless it is like the fire department got a grant for $6,000 in radios, it's in this year, and I'm going to bring that back as an amendment. It's going to be $6,000 in. They spent $6,000, but that's one and done. When it's stuff that takes more than a year, it's much better to do it in a capital project fund. So that's where those are at. They're sitting in a different fund, not an operating fund.
But now what would be neat is, I totally get what you're saying, but if we had a separate list of those.
I'd be glad.
It would just, part of that would be good.
And actually, it was my intent to try to put one in here to give you an update, and I was working on this until like 12:30 this afternoon, and I was getting really ugly looks because the ladies had to put the book together, so I just didn't have the opportunity to pull that in, but I'll be glad to provide that for you as well. So. Okay. Stormwater, there's not a lot to talk about. The rate is the same. We'll collect the same amount of money. Last year, my revenue number was lower because that was our first full year and I wasn't sure. So I wanted to make sure that I did not over budget the revenue and therefore overspend. So this year we included like $1.5 million for the stormwater fee, so that's what that number is. That we just didn't put a whole lot on this slide because there's just not a lot to talk about with the stormwater. So we're going to talk about now, we're going to start talking about expenses for debt. So in fiscal 19, across all funds, fiscal 20 adopted, we had a little over $9 million in debt payments, principal and interest. In fiscal 21, we have about $8.7 million. That's a decrease of about $312,000. And below that, on the bottom part of this table, I explained to you where that's coming from. The vast majority of that is coming from principal and interest reductions of about $1.4 million. We moved that Musco Bryan Multi-Sports Complex lighting payment from the general fund to the occupancy tax fund. That's why you see the minus $110,000 plus $110,000. There is some new principal and interest on some debt in the general fund, that $14,000. That's the used golf equipment lease that the council approved. I think it was like September, October, somewhere in that time frame. And then in the utility fund, those are those SRF loans, the new ones we did, like the $8.9 million for the Phase 4 sewer rehab. And then there are a few principal increases that makes up about $551,000 that adds to that debt. So that's where we get the $312. And what happens, I'm not the one that structured the debt, but I do find it interesting that in some of these pieces of debt, like the general obligation, the publicly traded debt, they actually have principal step-ups partway through the amortization schedule. So that's why that number's gone up, and we will experience that ever so often on some of these long-lived loans, that we actually see an increase in the principal payments partway through the loan. So it's not new debt, it's just how the debt amortization schedule worked itself out.
It went up $500,000, is that what you're saying? The payment did?
Yes, sir. And I also, part of that amendment that I'm going to bring back on June 15th was there was an issue with how the debt service schedules were set up. They weren't quite set up properly, so we've been following the model, and it did not account for some of these changes in the principal increases, so we've got to deal with that in this year's budget. But going forward, I have all my amortization schedules now corrected to what they should be.
The thing that bugs me some is, for, I don't know, 2-3 years ago, 3-4 years ago, when we first started looking at building the W.A. Foster, the Herman Park, we had, and I don't remember the name of the group, it's a financial group.
Davenport.
Davenport. And, they came in here and if you listen to them, we could have spent money for the next 5 years and had plenty of money. I mean, because basically our debt was going down, and they said you can afford this. What happened to all that?
It might be a longer conversation, but let me see if I can shorten it up. So they presented the picture to you because they were the ones that helped you close the debt, right? Okay, so they knew that you borrowed $5 million to do part of streetscapes, some streets, some utility improvements, so on and so forth. So they knew how the splits were, okay? Well, what I ended up finding out is that the actual amortization schedules that were given to me were not based on the split. So if you looked at theirs, they presented you what was closed in the debt, but what was actually getting done on the books is not what was getting done. It's what we ended up finding out somewhere around, I think it was the 1st of April, mid-April. We were working on some analysis together, and they said, hey, Catherine, did you know you've got some amortization schedules that aren't matching what how we agreed to it? So that's, I mean, yeah, I mean, they're telling you one thing because that was based on what they closed. So, but that's not what was the happening, and that's part of what it's been causing me so much angst, is trying to make sure that what the outside world said you were supposed to be doing, that's what we're doing on the inside. So that's one of the reasons. And I think we're in better shape now because I've gotten a lot of that cleaned up. So, you know. So I don't think they were trying to mislead you. But
No,
now
I don't think it was them. Who I'm totally just at loss with is our previous auditing firm in the county. I mean, they obviously are in another world
yes.
if they didn't get some of this.
Well, they were doing they were doing quite a bit of accounting work. They weren't doing auditing work. I mean, that's my opinion. Okay, so for whatever that's worth. And so the next slide, this lists your debt. So, you know, we have different kinds of debt. We have general obligation debt, which means we went out on the market and sold it, and that debt is held. So the general obligation means that the city is pledged their taxing power to pay for the debt. So if you don't show enough debt coverage to pay your general obligation debt, the government can come in and say you will raise your taxes to pay for the debt. So that's what general obligation debt is, okay? And then we have the next section is our state revolving loans. So those come normally through the Department of Environment and Natural Resources. It's federal debt, and that we compete for. We have several projects going right now, like the Plate Settlers project for $1.7 million, the Phase 4 sewer improvements for $8.4 million. And we also approved one for the gravity sewer rehab big ditch. That was one that y'all just approved the contract for of $1.2 million. And the water lines and booster pump, I think that has to do with, I think it's New Hope Church Road. I get mixed up on that, but that one's going to be $3.6 million. And then we just got a letter back in November. It was a letter of intent to fund for $2.9 million. I'm talking about everything on that far right column right now. And we have not yet accepted it because they need our audited financial statements, and we have gotten an extension on that. It is work that I understand from Marty Anderson, the engineer, that we need to get done. It's for 2-inch galvanized lines, which I understand after a while they start to rust. And so you start to lose water, which water is our commodity that we sell, so we actually don't want to lose the product that we're selling.
Are these loans or are
Sir?
these grants?
This is a loan. Yes, sir.
All three of those are loans.
Yes, sir. One of them has got, I think, some principal forgiveness, but I just don't remember right off the top of my head. So the items that are in, I know it's hard to see on the screen, but the items that are in blue are the new debt that's taken, and in green it represents the debt that's falling off. So we did have a little bit in general obligation that literally just fell off today. That it was a 2010 partial GO refunding. And none on this, but no other state revolving, because most of those are always 20 years, usually about 1.85% is what those loans take. So the form is basically, or this particular slide is going to tell you the principal and the interest from the previous fiscal year, and then what we're recommending, which is on the debt payment schedule, and then it gives you the amount that was outstanding for each, and then the far column is any new debt that we're predicting or proposing here. So we'll move to the next one. So we have a lot of installment loans. That's the other type of loan that we can have. We have several pieces that are actually falling off this year. So that number that we talked about earlier on the slide, the decrease in the 312,000, so that's where you see in green stuff falling off. That's where that's coming from. The new debt that we have, the tentative new, of course, we have Herman Park Center that's still pending. And the issue with it has partly been with design, partly has been with the LGC. They wanted more work done, more permitting, more subcontract contracts. They wanted that before they would allow us to get the loan, or before they would take it to the board to have it approved. And because we went past October 30th, they wouldn't do it until we have a new audit. So that'll be pending, once the design issues, I guess, get resolved. If the board wishes to move forward with it, then it's just a matter of us turning in the audit. And of course, the one thing I will say, just remember, it's about $1.4 million in a debt payment. So, it takes $250,000 to make a penny on the tax rate. So we're, as tight as things are right now, we're going to have to find the money if we decide to do it. So there's no debt payment in fiscal year 21 for the Herman Park Center. But if we do, if we start construction and we take this and we get it done in December, then the first payment would be due in fiscal 22. So we just have to think about how are we going to pay for that $1.4 million debt payment. The other small stuff I've already mentioned about the rolling stock, I'm going to combine 20 and 21 together. And then IT has requested, they do periodically leases to replace servers and desktops and things of that nature. And the manager and the director, Scott Williams, talked, and they decided to reduce the request to just do the storage and the servers, which is why this number is only $360 here that we're going to propose to finance with that. I guess unless you have any questions, we'll move on to the next slide.
And these pieces of equipment are things that I guess you talked to Rick about, Tim?
Yes, sir.
And how necessary are they?
Which particular piece?
Any, all of them?
Yeah, Rick thinks they're all necessary to get the work done, of course. I've been prioritizing them for years, so
Okay.
This is dependent on you adjusting the utility rates 25%. If we can't do that, we won't be able to pay for these things.
Okay. So our next slide, we talked just a little bit, I've already kind of touched on Herman Park Center, and we've talked a little bit about this water system improvements of the $2.9 million. We haven't accepted it yet. That has to come before the board for a formal resolution for you all to say, yes, it's okay for us to pursue that project, but we are on extension for that. Okay. And then, let's see, this is the equipment that the mayor was talking about, so our $737,000. This is the rolling stock that we are proposing to borrow on. Because it's rolling stock, we are not limited by the dollar amount, so that we don't have to go to the LGC for approval. So it's a fairly straightforward, simple loan to have to take. This 737, I guess if anybody has any questions about the type of equipment, we'll cover it a little bit later, but this is what we're planning on borrowing in the upcoming year.
As you can see, it's not very much.
And then there's the IT lease we talked about. So we'll talk a little bit about positions. And again, salary makes up the lion's share of that $63 million budget. So there were a lot of new position requests. We had 27, a lot of folks had a lot of need. In the discussions the manager and assistant manager and I had, these were the positions that he recommended. 3 in the general fund, 1 in stormwater, and then the rest, which there's 6, but the very one on the bottom, the SCADA instrument technician, number 10, is one that after I got the budget balance, the manager and the director, Mike Wagner, decided to go ahead and cut that, so that's going to come off of the budget. So there'll be some savings, that 51,000 will be some savings that we'll have in that particular department. The garage, part of their offset was they had a part-time mechanic, a heavy-duty mechanic, and so they send out a lot of work, a lot of sublet work, and so Rick felt like it would be in the city's best interest that, you know, we would save enough, and I cut enough out of their outside repairs, and with the savings, we took out their part-time that basically it justified and offset that. In finance, we had part-time receptionists downstairs, and what we'd like to do is make that full-time. That was actually a suggestion of the HR director to make that a full-time, convert it. So that position would just basically be reclassified from part-time to a full-time position, but we already had salary there for the part-time to offset. And
What's going to change?
nothing.
You just have someone there that's a full-time employee rather than 2 or 3 part-time employees.
We had 3 before.
It's basically the same money, I guess?
Yes, all these are offset by part-time pay we took.
And the golf professional is basically, they cut their part-time labor to offset the cost. And, you know, Manager, I don't know if you want to speak to that or not, the why part of
Yeah,
that.
the thought is this adds stability. When we did the interviews for the new director, every one of them thought we should have an assistant, obviously somebody that can be trusted there, not just to hold down the money aspect of collecting fees, but also to give lessons or, you know, Obi can't be there all the time. So given some of the issues we've had out there, I think this is an appropriate change.
Is this going to be $50,000 more out there?
No, this is
or-
probably about more like 40,000 than 49,000 listed there.
This has got benefits, so you've got to add like
Yeah.
another 25%. I mean, this number
All
has like
benefits
25%.
is money too?
I'm sorry, sir?
Benefits cost money too?
That's right. Well, but that's in that number. That's why it's so high.
But this doesn't replace any part-time people or anything?
Yes, it does. It replaces 2 or 3.
So how much money
It's
do you think?
offset. It's offset.
So you feel like that's an offset?
Yes, sir.
Oh, I cut her budget. She gave me the number and it offset the budget.
But does it hurt them for needing people?
No, because this person will take the spots of those part-time
Of all
employees.
three part-time? All right.
And I think too, the issue that they had at the golf course, you know, with those couple of break-in incidents there, is that from an accounting standpoint, I like the idea of having a permanent full-time person there because of the internal controls and somebody watching over things, so. And she did offset it with cutting in her part-time labor, so.
Catherine,
Yes, sir.
how many of these positions are those that were recommended in the water rate survey?
In the utility rate study, so they, what they did was they worked with Mike and Rick as to what their needs were. So all of the positions, there were actually more than, that are on the other page that were recommended that we just couldn't fund. So they saw the need in order to keep our system maintained and operational, that all of these were needed positions. It wasn't that there's fluff in there.
Why don't you talk about them real quick, Catherine, you know, to include the warehouse and purchasing manager, how it's currently unauditable in your audit, et cetera.
Well, let's go to
Let me-
stormwater first. Let's go in row. Go in.
That's probably going to have to be a Rick question because he'll have to answer the technicalities of why it's the stormwater tag.
Then you can go to the warehouse and like this.
But that's funded in the way that tax revenue's coming in, we'll fund that. And Rick thinks he needs the extra person to take care of the stormwater problems that are out there.
Yeah, but that's what I want to hear. What is he,
Yeah.
how many people has he got and what does he think he's going to do? That's what I'd like to know.
Okay?
I have a follow-up there.
So Rick is on vacation today.
That's not, we don't have to know today. I mean, it's not a big deal.
Yes, sir.
So that, what I'm trying to establish is, there were 4 positions that were recommended, and then 11 more for out years. I'm assuming those 4 positions were deemed to be critical positions. So I'm asking, are those 4 positions reflected up here?
Yes, I'd have to go back and look at the study, but I know we prioritized the initial positions here in this year. Mike Wagner, are you on the net? I don't know if you can talk to this.
I think he's in Randy's office.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, the number 7 and number 8 are the positions for the water valve maintenance team for the Public Works Department, and number 9 and number 10, which 10 has been, we decided to eliminate that. Number 9 is the additional operator at the water treatment facility. Some of the other positions were operators at the compost facility and the water reclamation facility, and we think it's a priority for us to have the treatment plant operator at the water plant as opposed to the other facilities for this upcoming year.
Mike, if you can talk into the mic more, you're a little bit garbled and soft.
I'm not sure if you heard anything that I said at all, but the 7 and 8 position were positions for the Public Works Department or the water valve maintenance crew, and those are definitely a priority for us, reducing corrective maintenance and getting ahead of the preventative maintenance that's needed in the water distribution system. The water treatment plant operator number 9 is a priority over the water reclamation facility operator and the compost plant operator, which were also originally requested.
I don't know, I couldn't understand.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so if I can try, the warehouse and purchasing manager, right now, you can't, in the audit process, determine what is out there. They review it, they know what's out there, but there's no checking in or out of that equipment. So what these people do is they run a warehouse for you on the supply equipment.
Here he is, his person.
Okay, Mike?
I apologize. You might have been able to hear me yelling down the hall.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Positions number 7 and 8 are the positions for the collections and distribution department. Those are for the water valve maintenance team. We currently have several thousand valves in our water distribution system that need to be exercised on an annual basis. We're currently not doing that, so those positions are a priority for us. The water treatment plant operator was a priority over the water treatment or water reclamation plant operator and the compost operator in the budget. So I believe I originally requested 7 positions, and I think Catherine, the manager, mentioned that we kind of reduced that to what was priority for us.
So Mr. Ham asked, how does these positions relate to the study that was done and the prioritization of the years they would be funded?
Rick's 2 positions, they flip-flopped originally with the study. They had requested another operator responsible in charge to split the responsibilities of the collections and distribution system. And through conversations, we decided it was a priority to get the 2 smaller positions as opposed to the larger position. As far as my positions go, those 2 positions that you see up there were in the study, as well as a part-time administrative individual and the 2 operators for the compost facility and water reclamation facility.
But were they supposed to be funded right away in the prioritization effort?
Yes.
On the warehouse and purchasing manager, and then the warehouse technician, why do you need both?
Because if you're going to run a warehouse, you've got to have coverage, so you've got to have somebody there to help.
Let me stop you right there. Why do we need the warehouse?
Why do you need the warehouse?
Yeah, I mean-
Because you have unauditable inventory right now. So when the auditors render their opinion, they're saying, are the financial statements fairly presented? And what they're telling me is, Catherine, you don't have inventory you can audit because there is no perpetual inventory system. So if the council doesn't, see that that's an issue, that's one thing. But, from an accounting standpoint, from internal control standpoint, you need inventory. I mean, you should.
The issue is there's $1 million, I bet, or more worth of inventory in that building, and nobody has a clue what it is.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
And Rick and I've had this conversation,
Well,
yeah.
but so my question is, why do we even need to have, you need inventory for an emergency. That's all you need inventory for. You don't need inventory, you know, you can go to wherever, Ferguson, wherever, and get the materials, order the materials, whatever. I mean, there's no need for us to have and be sitting on that kind of inventory. Where's the correctness or not correctness of that?
Well, and to be honest, just because we really don't have good records, unless there's one day a year when they take inventory, that's all I know about it. You know, because we aren't managing inventory, we're not managing what we're buying, or do we need all of those valves? Do you need
Well, that brings us to the whole point of what we said the whole time. What we need is a purchasing manager that knows what we're buying.
I agree.
And maybe not even, not even for that, I mean, that's where they start, but that's probably citywide, we almost need somebody like that.
Well, I mean, you think about not all the dollars, but $16 million in operational expenses. There's a lot of the buying that goes on with that. And so if you have someone that is qualified and certified, then you can probably save a lot of money. You think about in chemicals, Mike's got $1 million, one line item that he spends just in chemicals. I mean, we do probably 700 POs a year just for his department.
Probably need to help him buy his stuff too.
Absolutely, absolutely.
But to me, I mean, you know, we've talked about this, I mean, we should have had this a while ago.
Yeah.
But I don't know why you need two people in there.
Well, you know, how are you know, you can always start with one, okay? But just remember, people get sick and they go on vacation, and you've got to have somebody else. You can't have all of your knowledge resting in one person. That's just not good internal control. So the technician would help to, you know, stock, they would help to order. You really need somebody I'm not saying this gets into James Chester's territory, but just like managing tires, I mean, look at how much he buys in auto parts and look at how much he buys in tires, is managing, you know, do we have obsolete inventory? What's happening to it? You know, I've had an issue where stuff has gotten surplus and I didn't know about it. And I'm like, but why was it surplus like this? Why was it taken to the junkyard? Why wasn't it sold on Gov Deals? And I would expect a purchasing manager to watch the inflows and the outflows of all of that as well. It is just hard because I have one person in my department, and that person does insurance, she does FEMA, she does purchasing, she does accounts receivable collections, so she's spread pretty thin. So it is really hard for she and I to keep purchasing under control because that. So that's what my thought was.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
It's totally not looked after like it should be.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to figure out if we're going to fix it. I mean, do we really need the warehouse? That's the first question. I mean, could we operate the warehouse at a lot less capacity and just have stuff for emergency repair?
I would probably guess that, I mean, Rick's not here, but I would probably say Rick would probably.
It's a good time to fix it while Rick's not here.
Yeah, he would probably argue that we need inventory.
Well, Mike was a deputy down there for a while.
And I'm not 100% sure of what's all in the inventory over there, but I know for us and like our 26 pump stations, we're required for our operational permits to have, I believe it's between 10 and 20% of redundant pumps on hand for immediate emergency
And
repair.
are they in that warehouse? Is that where they're kept?
Well, we keep those at the WRF.
You don't know what's in the
I
warehouse?
don't know what's all over there, but I know we need to have certain things on hand. We're also running into a situation where the age of our system, we needed a check valve at our influence structure for our drinking water, and it took 6 months to get that check valve. There are not, I mean, the individuals that own the foundries for some of these parts now are overseas and to try to get that stuff. So I know we ordered an extra check valve to have that on hand.
Well, I think we should just have more conversation about this.
That's fine.
At some
Okay.
point, I mean, before we get too far down the road.
And then the one thing that I don't have in these slides that I did want to bring to your attention is in your actual budget book, we talk about permanent part-time, and in the personnel policy that the board approved, they authorized this permanent part-time, so those folks get prorated vacation, sick, holiday, and by law, like 2010, the Affordable Care Act, if they work more than the 30 to 32 hours, we have to offer them health benefits. And then with the local government retirement system, 2014, if you work more than the 20 hours, the 1,000-hour rule, you got to pay them retirement. And then also, because they're eligible for that, they get prorated 401K. So I have put in your big budget book a list of, I think it's 17 positions, that's 16 that these are people that are here, been getting the benefits. Because I do feel like, just like these FTEs, full-time people, permanent, part-time, that are getting benefits, I think the board should approve those. So that list is in your book. It is not in my slides. I just didn't have time to incorporate that in there. So just,
It'd be great information to at least have.
so, yes, sir. And it's in, after the manager's message in those summary sections, there is one that's got positions and benefits. So that's there for your review as well. And so talking about, just real quickly, I mean, we had a lot of positions that the departments asked for that we could not find the money to fund. So, we can look at that. I know we're kind of running short on time, so I'm going to try to move forward a little bit faster. So we have a total of 474 full-time positions. This request would bring us up to 482. So, like I said, it would be -1 losing the SCADA technician on that. Okay. And then we'll talk about benefits. So, we talk about that very large salary number, and this slide really breaks down all those benefits, and it's like 25% by the time you take in your Social Security, your Ledger's retirement, your health insurance, your 401K. And this is broken down by fund, how much the cost is, and you see wellness, and it's in red. That is what it cost, but we could not budget it. What has been done in the past, since this has been in place since 2016, I think, is the department's found the money. It's $300 per full-time employee per year, and so what we did is we cut that out of the budget. They'll have to find the money to fund it this year, but that's the cost of it. We had COLA and merit, which approximated the 1% COLA at July 1 and the 1% merit at January 1 at about $500,000. We have it left in the other budgets. We had to cut it out of the general fund budget to make it balance.
You have it left in the other budget.
I did not cut it out of the budget. So if we don't do the COLA or the merit at all, those would be savings in those particular funds, that we could take that and apply it to fund balance or use it for
So in
something.
the 31 million, that's in there, is what you're saying?
Well, you've got to minus out the red. I wanted to show you that.
Okay, well, you're just confusing me. 'Cause
I'm sorry.
You told me you left it in there.
In the other funds, not in general fund.
Oh, in
So they're
utility.
paid by utility.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So just in the general fund, wellness, COLA, bonus were cut,
Or
okay?
not funded.
And the salary study, so the Evergreen study that y'all listened to at the last meeting, so that 97,000 in the far right column, that's total. It was a total of 65 employees that were affected, that with the new minimums put in place, that is the salary only. That's not the benefits. You have to add about another 25% onto that as well. Okay. And then the next slide, pretty much it's the same thing. I'm giving you, if we did a 1% COLA, that would cost the city $263,000. There is zero in the recommended budget. The 1% merit at a half a year would be about $131,000, zero in the recommended budget for the general fund, okay? And the bonus, the same thing. It was cut out of the budget. We've got the cost of the 401K contribution. That costs us.
I'm sorry, go back up to the Evergreen study, because on one place you got 97,000, and then here you got 126,000.
That's got benefits in it. So that was the
So the
difference.
97 doesn't have benefits.
Is the salary only, yes, sir. And that's been incorporated into all the
Okay.
departmental budgets. 401K costs the city close to $1 million a year. Retirement, we are on a steady increase. The retirement system, in order to fund, they're jacking the rates up, and they have to because of the actuarial studies. So this year, it went up to 10.21% for regular, 10.84% for law enforcement. Next year, it'll go up, I think, about another percent, and I want to say, I think it goes up to like 13% in the next couple of years, so we're expecting that. And again, that extra cost was about $224,000 just this year alone. Health insurance, we have it estimated to increase about 2.5%, so to cost the city about another $36,000 if that's what it goes up to. Okay, so we'll try to tackle some departmental requests. We're going to hit the general fund first, and these are in order of the size of their budget. So in the police department, they had asked for quite a few line cars to be replaced. We only recommended 2, again, in order to balance the budget. We asked each department to provide us priorities, and Chief West said office furniture for the expansion, replacing the K-9 Elvis, who is retiring, and 16 vehicles and equipment upfit. The furniture, we think that we can get that out of the project fund for the police fire renovation, that there's enough borrowed funds left in that as we wind this project up to take care of that. Elvis, I believe he is going to buy them out of the drug forfeiture, which is an allowable expense for that, and we allowed him 2 of the vehicles that he asked for, that he desperately needed. I think one was wrecked or non-commissioned, so.
Yeah, I noticed initially the city manager didn't approve for K-9. Is there a reason why?
It is not actually in the budget. It'll come out of forfeiture, which is a special revenue fund.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. In the fire department, we funded, Chief Dixon had quite a few requests. We did fund the air packs and the fire hoses. The one thing that Chief Dixon said that Station 3 improvements and repairs, and this is like the backing up into the traffic, were an issue for him. We could not fund any of that request. But also in the book, under fire, there is a memo from Chief Dixon, and I think in the summary section with capital, there's a memo from him where he requests fire trucks and a Station 3, a new Station 3, and that totals about $4.1 million. And so if the board is interested in pursuing that, then we can move forward. That would be a capital project fund, which would happen outside of the annual operating budget. We just have to know if you have interest in doing that or not.
I also see item 5075, paving. What was the details of the paving for the fire department?
I believe that was for the training grounds for him. Is that right, Tim?
That's what I had remembered. Chief Dixon, are you on the net? You want to comment on that?
I am, and that's correct. Can you hear me?
We do.
Okay, yes, sir. It's at the training ground, and one of the things that we determined in talking with the city manager is that we've been able to effect training at the fire ground. This would be an improvement, and hence it was cut. But I appreciate the councilman asking.
Okay, I also had another question. I know you were requesting an all-terrain vehicle. What was the purpose of that all-terrain vehicle, sir?
Yes, sir. Thank you. When we had got together and talked earlier in the year about there was supposed to be possibly some, the city was applying for a grant, and one of the things that we were there was with the water plant, access to the water plant. This is also a vehicle that's going to allow us to access the greenways. It's also a vehicle because it's not only all-terrain, it's also amphibious. That will assist us in, one thing that we do know is going to happen in Goldsboro, we're going to have flooding. So it would give us the capability to go over dry land, also in the water. So it would just increase our toolbox in an area that we know we're going to be active in at just about every year. And additionally give us that benefit. There have been multiple times that we've had to go and make not rescues, but we've had to assist the water plant with access because of water level, and of course the new thing with the greenway, being able to access people that may be lost or injured there.
If you had to choose any of these items, the paving, the all-terrain vehicle, or the administrative car, which one would be more useful for you?
Oh, definitely the all-terrain vehicle, because that adds to our toolbox, and again, in a way that would probably be the quickest benefit to our citizens, something we're going to get use out of this year, next year, because of the flooding. It's just something that we hope to add.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
All right. And I'm going to move on if you have any more questions about the fire department. All right. We've talked about debt, solid waste, $3.6 million. We tried to highlight things that were important or high dollar amounts in their budget. The biggest thing that Rick pointed out in solid waste for him was the dumpster carrier and then the 2021 Freightliner rear loader packer. And we have both of those items, I believe, are in his budget as recommended.
I'm sorry, while you're looking for that, I have a question on the previous slide.
Yes, sir.
The new Station 4, I know we talked about it during the retreat, as far as the furniture, is that gonna be something that's gonna be looked at? I mean, as far as, has it been approved? I mean, are they gonna get that?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Chief Dixon has actually, he and Randy talked, and there was some monies left over, as I said, in that project fund, and they agreed on, I think it was $35,000 for furnishing that station, and then Chief West also had a request, I think his was like maybe $56,000. And I'm not sure if we can give Chief West that much. It'll be at least the same thing we had given to Chief Dixon to furnish. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir, that did get done. Okay. And that's pretty much it with solid waste. Like I said, 2 pieces of equipment there that'll be on our list to be financed. Parks and Recreation, Felicia had her priorities as the 2 park technicians for the grounds maintenance crew and the repair mowing crew, and 2 park technicians. I actually have a duplication there, I'm sorry. Basically, it was to help with all the mowing that they have to do, but also the streetscape that they're having to take up, the plantings and keeping that clean. We cut all those out of the budget, but she did indicate that, and I just, fair statement to her that she's going to do the best that she can. She knows she's going to have to use a little bit more part-time labor, which we had to take a big chunk out of it as well, which is part of our summer programs, just to get the budget to balance. The one thing that she has concerns about is, we don't have any funding for any kind of major repairs at Herman Park Center. There are plumbing issues, heat and cooling issues, asbestos issues underneath that building. And she also requested an equipment shelter at the Bryan Multi-Sports Complex for $220,000. That was cut out of the general fund, but then there was discussion about possibly whether the occupancy tax fund could help fund the construction of that shelter, and that was just conversation. All of that's been cut out of the budget. If we move forward shortly to do the Herman Park Center, Felicia can probably work through the issues that she's got. If it takes longer to work through Herman Park Center, there are some things that she is going to have to get done. At the time we had our budget meetings, she was trying to gather quotes to get, kind of these major repairs, these big patches that she needed to get done. She was working on that. I don't know if she's since gotten those numbers or not. I haven't seen that, so I'm not sure.
Okay,
I have a question. Catherine?
Yes, sir.
2 items on this I have a question about. One, tree service. We have bigger budget of tree service, and generally tree service is managed by planning.
Right-of-ways.
Yeah,
It's for right-of-ways.
If we put all the tree service under one program, wouldn't we maximize the dollars spent?
They could still do that. Jennifer's just managing the trees in the right-of-way, and Felicia's, this would be for her, within her.
But we've got to go out and contract 2 separate contracts. If we had one person overseeing that,
And
we
I
would
think
get a better return on the dollar, I would think.
And I think you can get some efficiencies having somebody that, like I said, a warehouse and purchasing manager that can help the departments pull together and say, hey, we've got a total budget of $500,000 for tree service instead of being 10 here. You can still have it in separate line items to charge it to the appropriate department. But I do think you're right that you can get some efficiencies by having one person helping to manage the request for quote process. I do think you can do that. There are some other needs, timing and things of that nature that might come into play, but yes, we can definitely help with that.
And the second item is sidewalks. I would think that we, since the bulk of our sidewalk work is done by another department, wouldn't they benefit more by putting the sidewalk repair and replacement under one organization?
And I think, Felicia, if I recall correctly, when we were sitting in the meeting with her, that they do try to get Rick's folks to help, because, you know, Rick's folks do a lot of Powell bill work for us with the sidewalks. And her folks do a lot as well, because she had actually cut some of it just to do materials only. And her folks help put in sidewalks as well. And if I'm not mistaken, I think this was going to be for the Herman Park Center, I think. Either that or one of the greenways, I think, because I think she's also doing that.
But this would be a transfer of funds from Parks and Recs back to Public Works to do the work.
They would just probably charge it to her line item.
Right.
Yeah.
So to piggyback off of what Councilman Ham said, item 5947 sidewalks, initially, the department requested $50,000 for sidewalks. The city manager didn't recommend anything. Is there a reason why you didn't recommend anything for sidewalks? We're in dire need of sidewalks in the city.
Just the tightness of the budget, sir. We can only do so much, so that's kind of where we're at with sidewalks in the Herman Park Center.
Well,
We need additional sidewalks from parking garage to the playground per se. I thought it was a nice to have compared to some of the essentials in the budget.
Well, I think that we need that. And I had another line item that I was concerned about, 3910, W.A. Foster demo renovation. Is there a reason why we're seeing 234.57, and then I'm not seeing anything further down?
That column represents the actual spent in fiscal 19, and Felicia did not have any request in there for this year.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. And the garage, you know, the biggest thing that I think Rick's priority there was the senior fleet mechanic, and it is one of those recommended positions that we have in the budget. And I cut auto, gas, diesel, parts, sublet, all of those I did cut quite a bit into the garage budget. Okay. And then information technology. Scott's priorities, he asked for several new positions which were not recommended, but he said his priorities were an executive assistant to help with the administrative portion in his department. He asked for several vehicles, a crew cab truck, a transit, and an Econoline van. We did put forth the crew cab truck, and that was to help pull that fiber trailer where they do the fiber repairs and things like that, and they've saved the city quite a bit of money doing that because that's a very expensive, specialized job. The biggest thing in Scott's budget is the IT lease, which is going to do the servers and the storage for his. And then in planning, we had to cut quite a bit out of cut and clean lots. Demolition took a big hit. Tree service, we did keep the maintenance of the enhancement areas because Jennifer said that she had a lot of extra areas that got added, so we left it as is. The right-of-way purchase, the payment 2 of 3, the $187,500 has to be in there. You know, that is required by the agreement or the agreement. Her priorities were tree service, the consultant fees for the required UDO updates, and then also her budget jumped so much because she took over minimum housing, which had personnel and then all those associated costs, plus the demolition was in that as well. So that's one reason her budget jumped so much.
Y'all must have cut the demolition way back.
We cut it way back. It was 200,000. We cut it down to
But
50.
My question is, you're just setting us up for failure next year. Because how are we not gonna do that? How are we not gonna cut lots? And on the cutting lots, we get paid, or we supposedly get paid back for it. But I mean, to me, I don't understand why we would do something so, it just cuts it back so much that it's not even realistic. Does that
Well,
make sense?
I mean, yes, sir, it does. And that's part of the pain of what we're going through is what do you cut next? I mean, I went through and I cut I asked everybody, you tell me in your operational budget what can't be cut. Catherine, I've got a contract, lease contract for a copier, you cannot cut it. Okay, they came back. I cut them back to their FY20 budget. And then anything else that like operational supplies, office supplies, maintenance supplies, building and maintenance, repairs, equipment maintenance, I cut them back like another 20–25% past their FY20 adopted budget. Cut the training and the travel, cut that, for most everybody was 30% past last year's. So I totally agree with you, but I don't, the equation, the equation is what it is. I mean, if we do, we got to figure out, if you want to put money in that, we can, we just have to find something else to cut. But now, we didn't spend any money in demolition, and we're not. We had $200,000 set aside for that this year. We're not going to spend anything in it because of the timing process, so.
The $50,000 will demo about 5 houses. And the cleaning and cutting of lots, those 2 line items, the city properties, if we just maintain and tear down the properties that we own and don't do anything else,
Wipe that out, wouldn't it?
we'll wipe that out. And we have some properties that look worse than anything that we're contemplating tearing down, I can tell you that.
Well, I think we just need to go back and look at that one.
Okay.
And Alan, he, like in inspections, he doesn't have any demolition money now, right?
No, sir, it's all in Jennifer's budget. Okay. All right. Finance, the biggest priorities in my department, I had requested an accounts receivable technician, accounts payable technician, insurance brokerage services, RFQ, because it's time. We actually should have done it this year, but I just had too much going on. So the gentleman that helps us with that, I've included that amount, and it's about, I think he told me it was like $13,000 or $14,000 to do the brokerage services, but that'll be in next year's budget to do that.
I don't understand what you're talking about by brokerage services.
So we have 2 companies, insurance brokers right now. Crawford Henderson handles our auto, our GL, the liability part, like the public officials liability and police officials liability. And then McGriff handles our liquor, and we're self-insured for workman's comp, so they handle the overage excess policy on the workers' comp. And so what happened about 3.5 years ago, Kay had bid out the services, and I believe BB&T was the holder of the brokerage services at the time. For whatever reason, they split it, and it's McGriff and Crawford Henderson. Well, it's time. The contract is up, and it's time, but I just said we'll go 1 more year. But we do need to bid it out because, I mean, it's just the insurance is a significant portion. I mean,
Well, I
it's...
understand that,
Yeah.
but whenever we buy insurance products from McGriff and from Crawford Henderson, they make commissions. I mean, why are we paying them above what they make?
It's not. This is for the consultant risk diversity. His name's Christopher Holmes. He's kind of our watchdog, and he monitors all these policies for us. And so he would go out, like we would use Davenport to do a debt RFQ. He would do the same thing. So he would go and help us develop the RFQ for the insurance services. So we would go out to bid, and then they would come back and say, here's how much your auto, your GL, your public officials, how much each brokerage company. So that's what we're paying for, not to the brokers. We're paying this to the consultant that would help us work through that. Because we probably spend at least $500,000 in insurance a year. So it is a significant investment for us to make sure we pick the right one. So, and then we did not recommend the AR Tech or the AP Tech due to budget constraints. And I mean, it's just, there are things that we need to get done that, you know, I know myself and my assistant director, we do AR tasks and AP tasks, and that's, Yeah, I mean, we just have to keep on doing it. But I appreciate the accountant position. We're moving forward with that. I have not had a chance to look at the applications, but my assistant director has, so we're trying to move forward on this, on that position as soon as possible. Engineering, they're pretty straightforward. The biggest thing that Marty had was he wanted the traffic engineer reclassified to the assistant city engineer because he's had the position open, I think he said over a year now, and just no bites.
But does
So,
that mean they're still gonna pay for it?
yes, sir.
Half, I think, is the appropriate number, so.
Yeah. So that was no budgetary impact, just a position, a reclassification. In street maintenance, Rick said that his priorities there were the Bobcat mini excavator with the tilt equipment trailer with the Ford F-350 truck, and those were funded and to be funded with debt in his. Okay. City manager, the big thing there that's a big jump is the air show sponsorship, again, this upcoming year as well. And their department takes care of the heat and cooling contract, which is a pretty sizable contract. In buildings and grounds, priorities for Rick there was the buildings and grounds supervisor, which was not recommended, a Ford truck for the mowing crews, and the automatic gate at the complex, and we did not fund any of those. In human resources, Bernadette's priority there was the learning management system module and outsourcing the background checks. Both of those were funded in the budget. In the Paramount, Adam's biggest priorities there were salaries for the part-time staff, which are used when they have revenue-producing activities, and the building maintenance to help sustain the city's investment. He cut his part-time quite a bit, and if he sees that as he's readjusted with COVID-19, things are picking up, then, we can obviously adjust because we would be adjusting revenues because he would anticipate more revenues coming in. Inspections, Alan's priority there was competitive wages for the staff, and I just wanted to make note that his budget is reduced because the minimum housing person went to planning. In the golf course, Obie, his priorities there were the assistant golf professional, the golf range picker, the range ball vending machine, and a walker trim finish mower. We obviously recommended the assistant golf professional and the golf range picker, but not the other two items in the budget.
Is the pro shop expense, is that to put stuff in the pro shop?
Yes, sir. So we offset that with a revenue. Yes, sir. And Public Works, his was just to maintain his operational supplies. Anything big on that? Agency support, so the biggest change there is the GWTA. We had requests of $378,000, which had some capital in it, but Don Willis was able to get some federal grant funding and was able to reduce the request. Thankfully, it's a big help to the city, $178,000. So his request went from $378,000 to $200,000. With the other agencies, in order to help balance the budget, we did a 10% cut from their FY20 amount. We had two agency requests. We reached out to them and asked them, because there are certain things, we need to know they're a nonprofit and they've filed their 990, they're in good standing with Secretary of State and so on and so forth, and we did not receive any responses back, and so we took those out of the recommended budget. And also wanted to remind you that this budget includes the second of 3 payments for the Mental Health Association for the substance abuse coordinator that the board approved. So that $12,000 is in there as well. And let's see, the agency support is on the next page. And before we flip, I'll just tell you, with the non-recurring capital outlay, the biggest issue, not biggest issue, but the biggest money that's in that is the city's portion of the retirees' health insurance. There are about 12 people that this applies to. That's a cost to the city of about $110,000. There is the economic development incentive for WMB landlords. This is 2 payments, which they're expected to meet their goals, so that'd be $200,000 in there. So that's what's making up part of that $410,000 budget there. I don't know if the board has any questions on the next page with the agency support. But like I said, you can see the change, the net change is a minus 10% for the agencies. Okay. Cemetery fund, again, the replacement of that John Deere zero-turn with the bagger, $12,964 funded with cemetery reserve funds. Mayor and council's budget, $350,000. Downtown development, their biggest expense is their downtown projects, which is the sculptures, and there's quite a bit of money in there to help with the hub, maintenance, and I think some landscaping or something like that they also put in there as well. Okay.
I had a question for you.
Sure.
Friends of Seymour, initially, give me a second. Princess Seymour, initially, it was, the manager recommended $61,500. Over here, I see $80,000.
Is that in city manager's budget or city council?
Mayor,
This is
council.
the city council.
City council.
What page are you on?
That is on
44.
23 in our big book, and 44 in the small book.
Friends of Seymour,
Yes,
it's $61,500.
yes.
Yes, sir. And that was the request, and that was what was recommended.
So why does it say 80K on the slide?
Because there's another, that is just listed as other. The request was $18,500. It wasn't specified on the detailed list on page 23. So the total between the $61,500 and $18,500 is $80,000, but it wasn't specified. I don't know, Melissa, do you know what that $18,500 is?
It goes, I can tell you, it goes to the Roosevelt Group. We pay the chamber pays the Roosevelt as our military consultant.
Oh, okay.
This is a joint county thing too, I believe.
Yeah, the county pays half too.
Yeah, this is a county.
So for clarity, we're going to be paying $61,500.
No, you're going to be paying 80.
Unless you decide not to. Still 80K.
Well,
With 16, with the 18.5 addition for the Roosevelt Group.
So what are some of the things that, just help me out here, Friends of Seymour, what's some of the things that helps our city with what they advocate for?
Well, they're a federal lobbyist,
Yes.
and they do whatever federal lobbying we do. We go up there a couple times a year and meet with our senators and people like that. And they're always always tracking stuff, sending us stuff. But that's basically.
So you've seen a benefit in the
Well,
past?
it's like funny you say that, because I actually was going to send an email to the Friends of Seymour Group and to the military, because we're not doing a very good job ourselves of communicating and keeping it together. And so we just we don't get updated enough. We don't, we're not doing it as good as we should. And so I'm actually going to try to work with the group and see if we can do a better job.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, I'm sorry.
I also have a question in regards to downtown development. You said some of that project money goes towards the sculptures downtown, correct?
Yes, sir.
Because some of that money, because I'm noticing, and I've even noticed it in the signage, the tourism signs, the Arts Council seems like it's just not even being looked at anymore. I mean, there's no signs that even say, coming into downtown Wayne County Arts Council. And I'm looking at the budget, and the owner of that building, they have a new owner now, and the rent's actually gone up a little bit for those people. Can some of that money that they spend on those sculptures go towards, I mean, that is the arts, and I think I like that department because they diversify a lot. I mean, culturally, they do a lot of exhibits and things that, enhance downtown, and it seems like, they're not looked at in that regard with these sculptures. I was just wondering, is there a way we could kind of offset some of the costs to give them some money for rent or possibly some money instead of these sculptures being switched out at $7,000. I mean, that's just a proposal I have.
Well, some history there is we have put a lot of money in that building. We've funded their elevator.
Yes,
And
sir.
we've given them money in the past. We give them money every year in our budget.
Okay.
So it's just a matter of how much you want to give them, I think is what it comes down
I
to.
think we're giving them 20, is it 22,000 this year?
25 or 20, 25, something like that.
And the rent's like $4,000 a month.
Yeah, but that's
22,
that's
right?
their deal.
Yeah, I understand that, but I mean,
And
if we,
the truth is, they were sitting on a pile of money that they've gone through. I mean, so at what point is it,
Now, you know what would be a good idea, being that they are the Arts Council, maybe they could come up with an idea to make their own statues. And
Right.
if they can make their own statues, then that would alleviate that cost that we're paying these individuals that we lease the statues from. That's just a thought, you know, I'm not on that Arts Council board, but I think that would be a great suggestion, you know, so.
Catherine, how much more you got?
Well,
15, 20 minutes?
probably,
Okay,
yeah.
well, Melissa was very nice, and she ordered us some supper.
Okay.
We don't want it to get cold, so we're gonna go in there and eat it, and then we'll come back. Is that all right with everybody?
yes.
All right, it's in the little room, the little conference room, Melissa?
Yes, sir, mayor's conference room.
You adjourning us? You adjourning us, or
Say it again.
are you gonna adjourn us, or you?
No, I don't think we need to adjourn just to walk in there and eat. Do we need a recess?
I would recess.
Okay, we'll recess till we go eat and come back. Is that okay?
Second.
I'm sorry, Catherine.
just due to budget constraints. However, I did make that note down there that there's $1.5 million left in the 2018 street bond escrow for street paving. And this is after that last contract that the board approved, and the name of the contractor escapes me, but this is minus that, okay? In community relations, the priority that the director there said was community awards and functions. We did cut that back a little bit, but did fund it in the amount of $11,000. And the other item of note there is we left the meals and nutrition supplies of $14,000 in that budget. In the Goldsboro Event Center, Adam had the same priority as far as the part-time staffing and the maintenance of the building to sustain the city's investment. Then we're going to move on to Stormwater Fund. Rick asked for a street sweeper, which the manager did recommend to purchase. That we will actually fund with debt proceeds.
I have a question.
Sorry, yes, sir.
Didn't we buy a street sweeper and it's been going back and forth to get repaired?
We have,
When Scott Stevens was here, we had a street sweeper. I remember it going downtown quite often. Then I noticed we got something in that was a temporary street sweeper because we were having problems with ours. So,
to my,
we have two
to
street
my
sweepers.
recollection, we have 3, and only 1 typically works. So we're going to try to get another one. So we have 2, and I'm sure that replaces 1 of the 3. I can get Rick to talk to it real quick if you want. He's out in the hallway.
Sure, I think it'd be good enough. Because I thought we had 2.
Yeah, street sweep, we do have 3 street sweepers, but throughout the course of the year, we were lucky to have 1 operational, and we went probably 2 months and didn't have any. This street sweeper will replace one of those. I think it's a Timco, or it's not the Timco. But it will replace the one we've been having the most problems with.
Was the one we bought just a few years ago, is it?
That was the
most of the
Timco.
time?
That was the Timco.
The one we bought, what was it, 3 years ago?
It's been.
It's probably more like 5 or 6 years.
5 years ago, I
Yeah,
think.
5 or 6
I
years.
don't think it's 5 years ago.
Well,
I
Chad
think
LeMasters
as soon
was
as I
here.
got
He was
in
the one
council,
that
we had
pushed-
got one.
Chad LeMasters was here. He was the one that was part of the purchase for that. Timco was similar to the ones we use on base, and he's been gone for 2, and then it was a couple years before he left, so, right when he first got here.
Because you guys have been getting like one just to fill in with one that's damaged. I seen one being brought here that it wasn't that we owned it, but basically it was one that we were using.
The only time we had a loaner, we had an event downtown, and our sweepers were down, and we needed to clean up. I got with the base and coordinated with them, and they sent the base sweeper down. Their crew came down and did run it on Center Street. But we've not had any sweepers on loan or borrowed or rented any street sweepers. We've maintained with the 3 we have.
Because I know initially we were getting downtown, the street sweeper will come through at least once a week.
Most definitely.
I haven't seen it much at all.
That's because it's been down a lot, and we've had an entire, when you have 3, we try to keep 2 running at all times with the staffing, and when you have 1 operational, I mean, it really puts a burden on trying to maintain the rest of the city. But we typically did come down, I think it's on Mondays, every week we try to clean up downtown and sweep downtown.
Well, you haven't done that lately, have you? Or you have? You said?
I'd have to get with this crew and see, they've been,
I hadn't seen that. Now, you're going to replace this one, is what you're saying? You might get a
we're
new-
replacing 1, yes, sir.
You're going to like get rid of it, replace it?
Well,
Are you going to keep it for parts or what? Or sell it?
we don't need but 3. Do we keep it on hand until 1 fails completely and use it while we can, and then put on gov deals? I really don't, does it matter to me? No. If we can get 1 more functional, and we can keep 2 up and running all the time and have a 3rd for a backup, because they're going to go in for maintenance. These things are used daily, so we anticipate going down for maintenance, or things will break, and having that 3rd one as a backup to keep it out in the city, at least 2 at all times. To effectively maintain the city and keep that debris out of the stormwater infrastructure, we need to be out sweeping with 2 every day.
What other parts of the city do you cover? Because I really have.
Anywhere
never
there's
often
curb and
seen-
gutter, anywhere there's curb and gutter. If there's curb and gutter, we need to get out and maintain it. So, we have certain areas when we're down to one that we know or we have more problems with because of the trees and whatnot, and we'll get out and clean those more frequently rather than just go through the entire city. But you have to prioritize. Downtown is typically a priority. I can check and see when the last time was they swept downtown. But to do it, it's part of our stormwater maintenance, our stormwater infrastructure maintenance. If we can keep the debris out of it, then it's easier to maintain. We don't have to send a jet rodder out and unstop.
Well, then, I was gonna ask you that, I've seen several, storm inlets that are full of leaves and stuff. Do y'all go by and vacuum them out in here or anything?
We do, the catch basins and stuff.
Yeah.
Well, before every storm, we actually go out. When it's on a rainy day or whatnot, we'll send crews out to the problem areas we know of. We can't get everyone. We've sent stuff out in our flyers asking residents to help us, help them, and rather than blow debris into the street and the curb and gutter, please blow it back in your yard. If you have a storm drain in front of your house, then please kind of clean it out, help us. We have limited staff as well, and it's a big city. But when we do find it, when they're clogged up, we do go out and jet rod it or vac it out. The new sweeper will have the vac capability as well, so if the operator is out sweeping and he sees a catch basin or whatever that is full of debris, he can stop, get off, and actually vacuum it out. They'll have a hose and I'll be able to do that as well, where our other three do not have that capability now.
Yep.
So,
Anybody got any questions for Rick?
I would like to have Rick comment on the tree service. I asked him and Felicia to talk to Jennifer about that. We talked about consolidating under one contract, and they thought it should remain separate contracts. Can you talk to that?
we did get off vacation mode here. I'm trying to remember. We had that conversation before I left. And she had more concern. She would have the contractor. We will have one contractor maintain the city, or at least one contract for the city. But we would, if I needed work done, I would go through that person. It would be pre-bid. My last discussion was we were going to have, just like our stormwater debris contract removal, we have line items identified. They bid on them ahead of time, so we get better pricing if we go out and competitively bid it. And then say I need an 18-inch tree removed, we basically go to that contractor's line item, and if it's $500, we pay $500. It's easier for us to maintain our own line item in the budget and then call on that contractor individually to do our work for us when we need it. I think that works better, and that's a great idea. We get, by competitively bidding it up front, it avoids us from having to go out. We have a problem now, we got to get it fixed quickly, and we go out and get one or two bids. They know we're in a dire need. We don't get the best pricing, but we can do it ahead of time, just like we do with FEMA reimbursement. It's a win-win for everybody.
I haven't looked in the budget, at your budget. Do you have money for tree removal?
For the stormwater side, I do. Well, last year we had $50,000 set aside for it.
And so that's the same thing?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
And what is that? Is that for ditches? I mean, where are you going to use that?
Yes, it's for ditches. And we have some ditches in some of the areas that have mature, full-grown trees in them.
Right,
And it's just going to take some initiative and effort on our part to go out and identify that. Now that we have, rather than have to go out for a bid, we have to identify it, get a scope of work written up, individual contract to do it. We can piggyback off of this contract and go out and...
Which is going to be the planning department's contract?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Anybody got any more questions for Rick?
That's good, I like that better.
Councilman Ham, did you
I
want
think you
Rick?
answered my question, but I was going to ask you about trees, but I think you've answered them all. But just for clarification, you're now handling it on an individual tree basis, right?
For the most part, we had some removed down. The last ones, I think we had a contract come in for were off of Ash and Slocum. We had some trees in the back area that were impacting flow for the stormwater. We had them come in and remove 3 or 4 trees. I think it was $5,000 or $7,000.
Would you agree that a single contract, that you can work off all of them?
Without a doubt, yes, sir. You can competitively bid it up front. I don't have to go through that hassle of trying to do something last minute. It's already in place. I just tap into it, get the contractor to come do the work for us. Most definitely.
And Councilman Ham, did you want him to address that street sweeper maintenance technician position that you had asked about earlier?
The maintenance tech, right now, the way the manning is, we only have one maintenance tech. We have 10, well, we've only been half manned all year. We're slowly getting there. I think we're still too short. But when we're fully manned, we have one maintenance tech. So I'm having to send out 2 operators in the jet back, where I can send out 1 operator and 1 maintenance tech, and I can send that maintenance tech with another operator to do another task, to go maintain ditches with the excavator and stuff like that. Instead of sending 2 operators out to do a task, I could send 1 operator and 1 maintenance tech to do. I'll get double capacity, double capability, by hiring just 1 person. And it's an entry-level position.
Anything else?
Yeah,
I just wanted to ask you this while I was on the floor. I think Councilmember Williams made mention of a ditch. Was it off Carnegie Street? There's a new development the housing authority is fixing up, renovating. I think it's called Trinity Court. But anyway, the question was the safety issue of how deep some of these ditches are, and how accessible they are to children. Is there any way like put a perimeter fence or something? And who
That's a
would
double-edged sword. We need to
Okay.
get access to it. I don't think in this case, if it's the one if I remember correctly, we don't own the property. We don't have a right-of-way or an easement on it either, but we have pipe that enters into the ditch. We have to get in and maintain, but we also have to maintain the ditch. If we put fence up, it makes it harder for us to get in and to keep the ditch, to keep the water flowing in the ditch. So you have to be careful. If there's I think the safety.
The other thing I've seen is whenever y'all put fences up, we don't maintain them. So 5 years from now, it would just be grown up.
well, if you get a wrought iron fence, something with access, so that they can get in and out of it, that's something that we could use. What's it going to cost us if somebody falls in there?
Fence isn't cheap. If you do it in one area, you end up, we do it all over the city too.
Well,
I think the safety guy looked at it too.
We always say, that we have to do it, if we do it there, we have to do it somewhere else. Let's start there, and then when we get to that other problem, we handle that. I think that's a real safety concern. Anybody that drives by there, they can see if a child was to go over there and fall in there, we're going to be liable. I mean, I like to at least try to get somebody to come out there, give us an estimate for a fence, and then,
Are you
council
talking about the
decides.
same place?
Yeah, same place, yes.
But this is not city-owned property, how are we liable? Not.
Well,
We had people check it, and it's not city
I'm
property.
not sure that, and I don't.
Maybe we're talking about different places.
no,
I don't
know
think y'all
exactly.
are right that we don't have some control over that ditch. We got a sewer line easement going through it,
Yep,
and I'm pretty sure we'd have to have some
liability.
We did
somebody-
double check with engineering, and they said we don't have an easement or right-of-way in that particular area.
I think
Yeah, I'm not going to speak for them. I'll let
I
them.
think that's right.
Okay, we'll double check and answer.
And because across the street from there, across Park Avenue, the big ditch keeps on, and the city came in there and concreted all that, and put the fence up and everything years ago. I think they just didn't ever get to this piece. So that's why I think somehow the city ought to have a right of way of some kind.
And on the concrete side, we can lower equipment in there and actually go down the actual ditch with the equipment and clear it out.
But y'all can check it out.
Oh, another question, sir. I know last time came, we had some PPE issues. How's that going?
Never really had any PPE issues.
Well,
It was proposed, but HR met with individuals, and PPE's been available the whole time. We have over 350, 400 masks available from day one.
well,
There's
that's-
communication breakdown, I think, was the
well,
main problem.
how's the morale there now?
Morale, I'd say 90% of the people things are good.
Okay, because, I just want, make sure everybody's functioning well. You said that
We're
PPE
knocking
was
it out.
available, PPE was available, others said that it wasn't available. I just want to make sure that everybody's fine, morale-wise. You're communicating, everybody's communicating with each other.
As far as I know, we haven't missed a beat since all this started. 110 personnel, I think all but one are showing up to work every day. I have one teleworking. Everyone's using proper PPE, distancing. We changed operations a little bit, no more than 2 per truck. We've had to correct a few people that forgot about it, but we're staying on top of things, and everyone's been healthy, safe. We're getting everything done, supporting the city.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
While he's here under the compass, well, that wouldn't really you be, that'd be Mike.
No, sir, I'd be Mike.
Yeah, never mind.
He's in the next room if you need compost.
Huh?
Mike's next door if you want to talk to him about compost.
Well, let's go ahead.
Good?
Thank you.
So I also wanted to address, I know Councilman Ham was concerned about the stormwater projects. It shows in the budget that Rick prepared for Stormwater Department that there was a request and we cut it. But what I did was If you look below in transferred and shared services, I'm going to set aside $250,000 and transfer it into a capital project, and then at what time the board decides if they do Virginia or Leslie and Beach or whatever that is, then we will bring that back to council, because what's happened is they've had the whole year and they've not spent the money, so that money's going to lapse back into their fund.
Yeah, I think there are two projects specifically identified in that.
Yes, sir. And we had talked about Virginia and Leslie and Beach is what was told to me. And so it was a lot more, because I think one project was 500,000 and the other one was just a ballpark number. I don't know if it was 150 or 200. So I said, well, we'll start with what we could to balance the budget, 250.
Leslie's going to be much less than what it was originally talked about.
Okay. So it'll at least get it started and set that money aside. So it is there and it's in place in the budget. Okay. In the water reclamation facility, Mike said there, the bar screens at Little Cherry Pump Station and the 117 bar screens and the UV system, we did have to cut the UV system because that's like $1 million. But it's part of those 145 projects that I mentioned that we do need to try to look at funding. And I do know he told me with the bar screens that the issue with those is like if they fail, you have a compliance violation, so you're looking at fines and you can't say you didn't know because you do know, kind of thing. So those were some priorities for him. And he, like I said, he has some big numbers and he has lots of chemicals, machine equipment maintenance, which takes care of some of these items. In the water treatment plant, he did ask for the engineering services update to the utility master plan, which was last done in 2008. It was about $515,000. We did cut that just to help balance the budget out. He asked for the operator one, which is one of those that's in the recommended positions. He also has in there a utility maintenance agreement to have our water tanks maintained on a regular basis. So how, we had the recent water tank we spent $1 million. We have $500,000 in there for New Hope. We cut about $250, no, it was about $150, I'm sorry, off of that, because if we do the utility maintenance agreement, which we do have in the budget, then that cuts that cost down to about $500,000 to fix the New Hope, get it repainted and repaired. I mean, it's just they're expensive to have to do. And then in distributions collections, Rick, he asked for the valve truck for the valve crew and the two positions that we talked about earlier. So the equipment and the manpower to do this valve crew, that's in there, as well as, I'm sorry, we did not fund, I don't believe, the excavator and the utility trailer, but we did fund the valve crew and the equipment necessary for those, the valve truck. In the compost, Mike said the heavy-duty wheel loader to replace the 2005 model that did not pass inspection, and the compost plant operator were his priorities. We did not fund the compost plant operator, but we did fund the wheel loader.
What's the machine equipment maintenance, $108,000? Right under the loader.
That's just part of their maintaining the equipment. It's just their repairs and maintenance account. But we can look, I can check.
No, I was just curious why you had separated it out like that.
I just, the kind of the past been to point out large expenditures, so that was what I did with that.
It's okay, don't worry about it.
Okay. And then, all right. So we've talked about the warehouse purchasing manager and the warehouse technician to address the audit issues. And what I did was the meter services, meter readers, the 6 of them, were in distribution and collections. And just from a timekeeping, payroll type standpoint, it was easier since I'm the one that supervises that department. We pulled them out in a separate organization. There were 6, and the council was told that with the implementation of the AMI, it would go down to 4. So we have abolished 2 of the positions, 2 of those meter reader positions. So there are 4 people moving into that department that exist in the budget today. And then, like I said, we propose to have the 2 additional positions for the warehouse and purchasing. And so we've pulled also some expenses into this organization, like the billing costs that we pay, the banking fees that we pay, the audit cost, software costs, things like that, that were sprinkled through the other organizations. So you'll see in looking at their budgets, you might see audit costs now that there aren't any in water and there aren't any in sewer because they're here in this, because Mike and Rick don't control those, so we were trying to put them in one place so they were easy to identify and that we could keep track of them a little bit better. In the utility fund, basically what's in that is we have utility improvements for the Wayne Memorial Drive. It's $125,000 that will be required, and the New Hope Road tank repaint and repair will be $500,000.
Question,
Yes, sir.
the New Hope Road tank repaint and repair, that's where we started at initially at $500,000 over here downtown. It went over $1 million. How can we be for certain that we're gonna stick with this number?
Well, you can if they have lead-based paint. That's what happened is it had lead-based paint on it, and they had to strip it, remember? I mean, that's what it is.
There were
Now,
some-
what somebody should do is go ahead and check it now and see if it has that or doesn't have that. So that is something we could do.
I mean, that tank's only been out there,
Yeah, it's probably new enough it doesn't have it, but just to be
35
sure.
years at most.
And this was, the estimate that Marty put together. And then in discussions with Mike said if we do the utility maintenance agreement, which we did fund in the budget, we could cut about $150 off of that. So I have to depend on them that's a good number, but we'll definitely double check and make sure, because you're right, we don't want to end up another $500,000, so we'll check on that.
I was a little disappointed when I saw them do a beautiful job painting it, but we didn't have a logo on it, any words or anything for $1 million, you know?
Part of that is historically it hasn't had any of that on it, is my understanding, why they designed it that way.
And if I remember too, because maybe it's Harris Street, we asked about getting logos on something that's that or Harris Street or one of them, but it was like
We'll take a look.
crazy expensive. Huh?
Harris Street has.
Okay, because one of them was crazy expensive.
I think the problem with the logo on the one on North Center Street is it's got all those outriggings to it, you really couldn't paint it. Where they put, go ahead.
So what's been identified in our 10-year CIP is about $3 million worth of work that needs to be done to our 4 water tanks. If we go ahead and move forward with an asset management plan, it's going to spread the cost over 10 years. New Hope tank, the estimated repairs and painting of that tank are somewhere around $850,000. However, if we budget all 4 tanks, internal cleaning, valve maintenance, the corral repairs that are needed to be done, we can spread those costs over. And so year 1 and year 2 are estimated to be somewhere $400,000 to $500,000, and then that kind of drops off over the next couple of years, because if we look at Center and Holly tank, that was just painted, and then I think if we circle back around, the next tank that would end up being an overcoat would be about year 8, and that would be, we'd be back over to the Harris Street.
But are you going to have somebody give you a 10-year proposal?
Yeah, we've talked to 2 different people to try to get some soft estimates,
Okay.
to see if we can move forward with this. And it looked like we'd save about $1 million over 10 years if we did the plan, as opposed to having to, hey, we need an additional $500,000 for lead abatement or something.
Good deal.
Thank you.
And then in the transfers organization, we have our final installment for the water and sewer utilities for the streetscape. So this is going to fund that $1.7 million for the Tiger streetscape. And then there'll also be a transfer for the Seymour Johnson outfall that'll be bid here. I think we open bids in a couple of weeks on that. And that's actually funded by 2010 sewer bond proceeds that are still sitting in the escrow account. So this will be the last little bit of that money, and that'll be transferred out into a capital project fund. And this one also takes care of the shared services. So the utility fund pays for a share of the general fund, which is the council, the manager, finance, human resources, things like that. So this had always been tucked away in another couple of organizations. So I just pulled it out into its own, but that's about what it's been costing every single year. It's been a small bump up in it. So talking about the Downtown Municipal Service District Fund, I just did a quick snapshot with revenues and expenditures on one page. Their revenue's fairly consistent because all of it is property tax from the MSD fund. We are not proposing any sort of tax increase, property tax increase in the general fund or MSD fund. So the MSD rate would still stay at 23.5 cents per $100 valuation. And this is just a snapshot of the expenditures of how they want them allocated. If you have any questions, we can talk about it, or I'll move right on.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see what they did with the money they had this year.
Okay.
How they've allocated that.
So kind of a progress report onto what they got accomplished?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, we
Well,
can
initially, I
definitely-
thought that at our retreat, City Manager Salmon, he had a gentleman come that was doing some great things for their community. So I thought we were going to kind of restructure our downtown. I know we're at the district right now, but I'm talking about the DCDG.
So right now, this is one of the positions that's frozen, sir. Erin's filling the downtown director's position right now, so the media relations position that she's filled is currently being held. So I think it adds up to about $60,000 in savings. So if you want to hire a new citywide economic director or even replace that position, that's additional costs that we're trying to save right now. So we've held it in our budget personnel costs. Going forward, could we add that position? Yeah, and I would say we should wait until we see what our revenue looks like.
I'd like to see us, if anything, hire someone that's a grant writer that can do, a lot of things that we kind of have to source out.
Julie was very good at that.
And talking about the occupancy tax fund, basically the same thing, snapshot of the revenues and the expenditures. The current levy is the 5% for the local hotel motel occupancy. There is a fund balance appropriation, we talked about this very early on, of about $115,000, which is that debt payment for the Musco lighting and the balance to fund the air show. And then the manager is also recommending to fund an additional $40,000 for advertising and promotion out of the fund balance. And those discussions occurred after I'd gotten done balancing the fund, and it's just too hard to try to go back and redo all those numbers and get the book produced. So if the board is okay with that, an additional 40 coming out of the fund balance, then the adopted recommended that we provide you on the 15th would have that in there, and it would show, $154,000 instead.
Well, I'd like to see what they're going to spend the $40,000 on.
Yeah, we'll get you those details. Initial thought was with COVID-19, can we do some savings on advertising here since there may not be that much going on? But
It looks to me like you ought to have enough money anyway because you haven't spent any money much this year. Well, I mean, to me,
well, that money's going to be collected up at the end of this year, so it's what you want to put into going forward. And then, Ashland would tell you a lot of other communities are trying to advertise to make up lost ground. So I'll get the specifics.
yeah, let's do that.
Okay, capital outlay, apologize for the small print, I was trying to get it on one page. So departments asked for about $8.3 million in capital outlay. We're recommending $2.8 million. And so, obviously because of budget constraints, we could not, we couldn't fund as much as we wanted to. We have included the list of things on the pages that goes by general fund, stormwater fund, utility fund. The far column on the right that says budget recommended, those are the items that we are recommending to be funded. For example, in information technology, a drone, I think they've got the one they have is very old and it's the only one, so they were looking to replace it. The fiber finder kit and the IT lease, those are going to be borrowed funds. And then also the truck for hauling his fiber trailer. If you move on down, cemetery, we're recommending the mower that we talked about. And then in planning, again, some of these things like the Central Heights right-of-way acquisition, we're required to do that. And then we also have the Wayne Memorial bulb out, we're required to do that by agreement. In streets, as we talked about, the Bobcat Mini and the service body truck and the trailer. And they're also replacing 2 dump bodies on dump trucks. So the dump trucks have got some age on them, but they're in good shape. It's just the bodies are rusted. So instead of spending, I think he said like $150,000 on a new one, they can just replace the body. So they're trying to manage their money like that. The multi-use, we talked about paving the Stony Creek Parkway, the $187,500.
Do we know where that is? Which
Sorry?
part of the parkway that is? Anybody know?
That might have to be a Jennifer.
Felicia, are you on the line? Or Jennifer?
Well, we just have to want to
Is that the parking lot or parkway, like the trail?
Greenway.
Greenway, okay.
But I'm trying to figure, I don't know where there's not one that's not already paved.
Catherine, our manager, I'm on the phone.
Jennifer,
Yeah.
where are you paving this at? The Greenway, the Stony Creek Greenway, where is that?
The Stony Creek, I'm not sure what that is. Nothing that I'm aware of with regards to the Greenway project. It may be the match that we have. We did get a Stony Creek Greenway project with regards to E 5707, but I'm not sure. It may have a match associated with it, but that would be a Marty question.
No, we'll just let Catherine find out. Can you check on that?
Yes, we will. Okay. And then in solid waste, we talked about the rear loader for the $200,000 and the leaf vacuum loader replacement, and then a dumpster carrier that Rick has asked for solid waste. In the fire department, we are funding fire hoses and air packs and a thermal imaging camera. Police, Chief West has 2 vehicles that I think one of them is dead, so he requested that these be replaced. 1 tsunami camera, and then they need a commercial grade refrigerator to meet CALEA standards. They have a residential Kenmore right now, and so that's what they're asking for.
Is Chief West on the line right now?
I don't know, sir. He's probably busy with the protest stuff.
Probably. My question was about Shot Spotter. You know, that's a big purchase item that we have that we pay for every year. And I just want to know if it's really making a difference, because that's a bulk of money we could use somewhere else.
Yeah, I would say, I think it makes a difference, sir, in our responsiveness. And at the very least, there's been 2 cases this year of people shot that were picked up in a timely manner by our police that we wouldn't have known otherwise, that weren't called in. So I think it's saving lives that way. We certainly get evidence from that we might not otherwise get in a timely manner. And he can relate specifically to that if he'd like at a later time.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
In Parks and Recs, we're recommending the funding of 1 of the Hustler mowers and the top playground at H.V. Brown Park. Felicia, obviously, she had a lot of requests, and just due to budget constraints, this was all that we could manage to work through. In the golf course, we're recommending that golf range picker device.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Felicia, you on the line?
I am.
Tell me what the status is of the contract for T.C. Coley.
For T.C. Coley, are you referring to the
For
boxing
the
club area?
the tenant contract.
Okay, so the tenant contract, the one that we had in place, I believe was with Ashford Boxing, and we came back before you all at council to make an adjustment to the contract, and then once that was done, it was forwarded on to Mr. Ashford for him to sign. Shortly thereafter, we went into COVID-19 with it hitting us mid-March, and so at this point, we have not received the contract back from him, but he also has not been in the building since then either.
Okay, so we shouldn't let him back in there until we have a signed contract.
Right, and like I
That's
said,
it.
at
That's
this
not-
point, we
that's
sent
just
the
a statement on my
contract to,
I'm sorry, say that again?
oh, I was saying, at this point, we sent the contract to him to sign, and he and his lawyer were in the process of signing it, and they were in the process of arranging the payment, but then, like I said, the whole COVID-19 hit, and we had to shut down facilities, including T.C. Coley, so he couldn't get in there. And so because we shut it down, we have not received anything from him or his lawyer, but like I said, I mean, they haven't, or he hasn't been in there either. Because when we reached out to him to let him know, okay, we're closing facilities, he has not been in there, and my staff, we go there weekly just to, make sure, buildings clean, things of that nature, so we know he hasn't been in the building.
Does he have keys to the building?
I'm sorry, can you ask that question again?
Does he have keys to the building?
Yes, he does have keys to the building.
Well, I'm going to restate just my position is that based on past performance in relationship to signing a contract, that before he's allowed to go in there, we should have some written agreement between the city and him.
Felicia, y'all just
We will
need to
make
reach
sure
out to
that
him
that's
and tell him he needs to sign that agreement before he can go back. It's really that easy.
Yes, right, and we can make sure that is done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are you finished, Kevin?
I'm pretty much, I mean, there's really not, we've talked about everything, I think. We talked about the street sweeper, we talked about the technology lease. Really, we talked about the valve truck, and I think Councilmember Williams, you asked about the amphibious vehicle.
Yes, I'd like to-
There is one funded in the wastewater treatment plant, which can be shared with the fire department. So even though we cut it out of the fire department, they will be able to get one because they need one to do their perimeter there with the basins, so they will be able to share that.
I don't know how, how that would work. I hope that they would be willing to share it, but I see we did a nice amount of cutting when it came to requests that the fire department had. So, I'm sure we can pull from somewhere else to get them that vehicle if council decides that it's important. I had another question. CBDG funds, I know that there was funds that we didn't use. Can you tell me the status of that right now?
That really, I'd have to get with Shacole and get some more information because I'm still trying to get that sorted out. It's how it was accounted for, it's a little wonky, okay? I'm going to tell you. It's not that she has not done anything improper, but I'm just saying from our book side, I'm having trouble still trying to get everything reconciled. So I understand there is some monies that are left over. Are you concerned about funding certain things or just wanting to know how?
I'd just like to know what we have in place so that, maybe we could shift some things where we legally can move some things around.
Okay.
Excuse me, I'm so sorry. I accidentally cut my phone off. Was I asked to answer any questions for CDBG?
Do you have a specific question for us, sir, on what the types of money you thought were going someplace?
Whatever has not been used,
In this fiscal year
yes.
or the next
In
budget?
this fiscal year.
In this fiscal year. Shacole, can you talk to funding from CDBG that has not been used in FY 1920, current fiscal year?
Yes, there is roughly around $180,000 that is prior money for CDBG funds. That has been allocated in the CDBG budget that is out for review under public facility improvements of city-owned properties. That will be able to do things like storm drainage, other utilities or needed infrastructure type project. For home, there is, of course, you all know that money has rolled over for your rental housing development, but the CDBG funds has rolled over to public facilities.
Mr. City Manager? I got that, Mr. City Manager. Fiscal year 18-19, what do we have in place?
Fiscal year 18-19?
Yes.
Funds that were rolled over to the next year?
Yes.
Yeah, so this is the reserve you're talking about 400,000's worth?
Yes.
Yeah. Council
you-
still needs to make a decision on how that's going to be used, is my understanding.
And that is in the comp plan and what we call the annual action plan that is out for review. And as I stated, that has, funding has been moved over into public facility.
Right, so that'll be part of the next council meeting's discussion, right? The comp plan, Shiko?
Yes, sir. That would be at your June 15th for a public hearing, but the plan is is available out and was made available May 27th. And if you all would, don't prefer the electronic version that you can pull from the website, I can definitely have hard copies printed and have the clerk put them in your box.
Thank you.
Would you like that, sir?
Yes, I would. Thank you.
Okay.
So next step, comments, additional information that you need.
Well, I guess we're gonna need to meet again, but the question is, how soon do you need us to meet again?
It depends on what you'd like to change, or if you would like some additional information, how would you like to conduct that? Do you want to go through more detail?
Well, I feel like there's gonna be some changes.
Okay.
I don't personally know how many, but I think, just from the comments I've heard, that people are gonna have different opinions. And I guess we need to come here, talk about the changes, and then you're gonna have to talk about how it affects somewhere else.
Sure.
And, they'll probably need to do it sooner than later. Probably maybe one day next week.
Well, she said June 15th would be, she said June 15th would be,
Yeah, we're going to need to make a decision on June 15th.
Yeah, I think you're gonna want it before June 15th.
Yeah.
So the public hearing has been advertised for June 15th, 7 o'clock. You have until June 30 midnight to adopt a budget. So, we can always continue if we still can't come to a decision.
Well, now here would be
by
the
then.
question for y'all. We could do one of two things. We could meet ahead of the public hearing and do our own changes we want to make, or we can do the public hearing and see what maybe changes are there, and meet after that and do whatever we might want to change from the public hearing and whatever we might want to change. So it's just kind of how y'all want to do it.
I prefer doing it before the public hearing.
Doing ours before, and that way we present what we think we're going to do at the public hearing. Right?
That's fine.
Okay. All right, so Melissa, can you get everybody lined up for one day next week?
Absolutely.
Okay.
and I just talked with IT and the people who need to see the budget, it's online, so they can find it online.
Okay. All right.
Okay, that's it.
All right, thank you, Catherine. Now, I guess since you're sitting there, we might as well go ahead and move to the consent agenda. And the first one, item B, is yours. This looks like this would help your budget.
Sir?
This would help your budget.
It would, a little bit. At least a penny or two. This is to accept or reject the initial bid and authorize finance to advertise for upset bids on 808 West Grantham Street from Grayson Brent Evans. And council must either accept or reject the offer, and this is in accordance to General Statute 160A-266 and 160A-269. We have received an offer from Grayson Brent Evans for $615,000 on 808 West Grantham. The bid deposit was $30,750 and has been received in the form of a business check out of state. And the tax value on the parcel is $681,000, and the zoning was 21 restaurant. According to the policy that we have established, the offer should be at least 50% of the tax value of the property. The bid deposit is 5% and has been received. The offeror had additional terms and conditions that he wished to negotiate. And so if he is the highest bidder at the end of the upset period, then this resolution that we've drafted would allow city staff to negotiate the final terms and allow the mayor to execute any deeds or contracts thereof, and then to close if there are no upset bids. If there are upset bids, that does have to come back to the council to approve. If city staff cannot negotiate any terms, we would bring it back to council and then let the council decide which way you, if you wanted to just withdraw the property or if you wanted to negotiate further terms.
What's the 10-day upset period?
What's the 10?
When is it over, the 10 days?
So it counts 10 days once we advertise, so we probably can't get an advertisement in the paper. If I get her to do it tomorrow, you know, it might be Thursday or Friday, so you count 10 days from that.
So it won't be, doubtful that it would be the June 15th meeting then.
No, it won't make the June 15th. It usually, this is about a 30 or 40-day process. And so just, you know, there are CDBG funds that were involved, and that totals $250,971. It would have to be returned to the CDBG fund, and then any remaining proceeds left after closing would go to the general fund, and the council could designate it any way they wish. So I just need an either accept or reject.
I think we ought to. I make a motion to accept the offer.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, raise your right hand. Oh, it's on the consent agenda.
Well, we do
Yeah, it's on the consent
We
agenda.
didn't make a decision whether to accept or reject.
Yeah, well, if we do this, approve the consent, that's just making a recommendation. But that's fine, we're good.
As long as we had that problem.
Yeah, we're good. All right, item C is,
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I have item C, which is the bid award to Withers Ravenel for the Source Water Protection Plan and a WIA Risk and Resiliency Assessment and Emergency Response Plan. North Carolina General Statute 130A 320 requires the City of Goldsboro as a public water supply to prepare a source water protection plan, and the America Waters Infrastructure Act of 2018, also known as a WIA, requires us to prepare a risk and resiliency assessment and update our emergency response plan with that accordingly, with the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality and the Environmental Protection Agency. This evaluation includes the risk of the system from malevolent acts, natural hazards. It also evaluates the risk of the pipes and constructed conveyances, physical barriers, source water, the collections and conveyance system of the intake structure, the pretreatment. This includes physical and cybersecurity assessments to such systems which are utilized by the system, and it evaluates the monitoring practices of our system, our sampling to ensure compliance, and the financial infrastructure of the system. It also evaluates the use, storage, and handling of various chemicals within the system and the operation and maintenance of our system. The City of Goldsboro advertised for requests for qualifications on April 21st of 2020. We received 7 responsive RFQs, which we reviewed. We decided to interview 3 of those firms. From the responses, after some staff discussion and reference checks, we requested a proposal from Withers Ravenel out of Cary, North Carolina. A proposal was received from Withers Ravenel for the services in the amount not to exceed $89,400. The city has allocated monies in the budget of FY 1920 for these services. It is recommended that the City Council approve the attached resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a contract with Withers Ravenel not to exceed $89,400 to provide services for the source water protection plan and a WIA risk and resiliency assessment and emergency response plan.
any questions for Mike? All right, thanks, Mike. All right, item D, we took off till the next meeting, correct?
Yes.
Item E, Daniels and Daniels.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Do we have a... Item Item E is Site 820, Daniels and Daniels Construction. This is Wayne Christian School Classroom Expansion and Parking Lot Addition. The property is located on the west side of Patetown Road between Kearney Lane and West New Hope Road. The property is zoned office and institutional. The submitted site plan shows a single-story, roughly 3,000 square foot building of wood frame construction proposed for the use as STEM classes or classroom and used by high school students in the 9th through 12th grades. The floor plan for the proposed classroom expansion consists of 2 science classrooms, a prep station, and restrooms for the students and staff. The site is served by one main access located at the intersection of Patetown Road and Catherine Street, and then the main exit for the site is located at the intersection of Patetown Road and West New Hope Road. An existing 25-foot wide paved access drive extends throughout the site, providing access to the campus, daycare, and recreational facilities. A new parking lot is also proposed as part of the expansion, and parking for the school is based on 1 space per classroom or 1 space per 5 seats in the main assembly area, whichever is greater. And according to the city's parking ordinance, 90 parking spaces are required for the site. Currently, there are 149 existing parking spaces for the site, and the applicant is proposing an additional 18 spaces for the new classrooms. 2 large trees are proposed for the new STEM classrooms parking lot in accordance with the city's landscaping ordinance, and no other landscaping is required for this project. Exterior building components will consist of masonry, clear glazing, brick veneer, wood columns, and architectural asphalt roofing shingles. And I just want to point out this square foot addition, the school hopes to do this project in phases with regards to this entire elevation that you see, but this site plan is just for this end unit here. They will move forward with this at a later date. City engineering is currently in the process of reviewing drainage plans and is awaiting stormwater calculations for the proposed site. Improvements, construction permits will not be released until city engineering requirements have been satisfied. City water and sewer are available. The Planning Commission at their meeting held on May 26 recommended approval of the site and landscape plan. It is recommended by motion accept the recommendation of the Planning Commission and approve the site and landscape plans.
Any questions for Jennifer? All right, we'll move to item F.
Item F is Site 920 William Raymond, which is a proposal for a fitness center. The property is located on the west side of South John Street between Olivia Lane and Wayne Avenue. The property is zoned I-2, which is general industry. The commercial property was formerly permitted as an interior and exterior commercial painting contractor's office. The applicant is proposing to utilize the existing property as a fitness center. According to the City of Goldsboro Unified Development Code, fitness centers are permitted within this zoning district. The submitted site plan indicates a single-story, approximately 7,200 square foot commercial building of metal frame construction proposed for the use as a fitness center. This is an aerial of the site today. Our previous aerial, when we did our site plan, showed the site back in 2017. This is the site the way it looks like today and has been cleaned up with its most recent use as the painter's contractor's yard. And this is an elevation of the property in discussion. Hours of operation are Monday through Friday, 5 a.m. to 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. The site is accessed by an existing concrete apron which fronts John Street, approximately 130 feet wide. Parking for the fitness center requires 1 space per 100 square feet of customer participation area, and based on 3,000 square footage of customer participation area, 30 parking spaces are required for this site. As I previously stated, the existing concrete apron that fronts the facility is majority within the public right-of-way. And according to the ordinance, parking spaces shall be arranged to require ingress and egress from the lot to the public street by forward motion of the vehicle. Currently, not enough space exists in front of the facility to prevent employees and customers from backing into the public right-of-way with exiting the site. A total of 5 spaces are available for the parking at the northern and southern ends of the building. A gravel parking lot exists behind the facility to accommodate the remaining 25 parking spaces required for the fitness center. However, city ordinances require the parking lot to be paved. The applicant states that he offers group fitness programs consisting of not more than 8 to 10 people per session and that 30 parking spaces are excessive and not necessary to accommodate the parking needs of his clients. In addition to providing parking at the rear of the facility, the applicant intends to utilize the gravel surfaces for an outdoor fitness area and states that the paved surfaces would not be practical or safe for workouts. And due to the limited size of his classes and to financial hardships associated with COVID-19, the applicant is requesting a paving modification for the existing gravel parking lot located at the rear of the property for a period of 1 year. Street trees are required along South John Street. And again, as you see there, the existing apron prevents the installation of these street trees, and the applicant is asking for a modification. Portions of the property are located within the special flood hazard area known as the floodway and the 500 and 100-year floodplain. City water and sewer are available to serve the property. If council does not waive the paving requirement, drainage plans and stormwater calculations will have to be reviewed and approved by city engineering before occupancy of the facility. Concrete and handicap accessible walks have been provided for pedestrian access leading from the parking lots to the building entrances. And according to the city's pedestrian plan, exterior sidewalks are not required for the site. Just a reminder, the modifications the applicant is requesting is a modification of the paved parking surfaces at the rear of the property for a period of 1 year and modification of the street trees along South John Street. The Planning Commission at their meeting held on May 26 recommended approval of the site and landscape plans with modifications. And is recommended by motion accept the recommendation of the Planning Commission and approve the site and landscape plans with modifications. Any questions?
Jennifer, I can't remember, does the concrete go right up to John Street? I mean, is there a place yeah, because there's not anywhere they could put street trees anyway.
Yes, sir, it's all pavement roughly 130 feet here. They do have area in the back to accommodate parking, but this is just hardships.
Well, I was just trying, if we could get a little bit of landscaping in there, it would make the thing look better, but I'm really worried that if you put trees out there, somebody just run over them. Yeah, okay. Any other questions?
I do. Not directly to this property, but with the requirements of having to have landscaping, is there a height requirement for some of the shrubs? Because I know some of those intersections, if you have that landscaping right at the corner, it's hard to even see coming out of these places. So is there a height requirement for like what trees they have?
Maturity should be 3 feet or less.
Okay.
When within the street yard.
Thank you.
That answer your question? Okay. All right, that it?
Thank you.
All right, Dave, the only other thing we got is one resolution, and I gave that to Bill to read, and I think that's it. Does anybody else have anything?
Closed session items, sir, for personnel issues.
What?
Do you want me to read this resolution now or read it at the main meeting?
Well, Bill, who you gonna read it to, No, you need to wait till the meeting at the end.
I'll read it right now.
It doesn't do you no good right now. Well, if we're gonna do a closed session, let's do it now.
Then I make a motion, we go into closed session
For
personnel.
Second.
Is that a second?
Yes.
Any discussion? Everyone raise your right hand. We're in closed session. Melissa, will you shut that door and cut the mics off?